Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Tonight, we are having the third annual Eva Awards. This is our award show, our year-end show, which deals with everything to do with Big Eva and, culture at large. And it's sort of our year-end superlatives. And this is something we do every year or have done since 2021, hence our third annual. And it's a lot of fun to just really review and recap the year. And we got some good categories, good nominations, and some hot takes to kind of discuss tonight. Anthony, how excited are you about the picks that you got?
I mean, I've been plotting this for months. Let's just be honest. Got to recap the year as you go along, and it's been certainly a crazy year. And I got some themes when it comes to the superlatives for the end of the year, just to kind of recap it. And of course, we started all off with the top 10 stories of the year.
Yeah, so the top 10 stories of the year, this was a very difficult year to do a top 10 for stories. And I got to say I didn't necessarily follow the trend of what Christian Post did or the Gospel Coalition did. They had some, very odd takes for a top 10 stories of the year. We'll do a comparison, but they left a lot of stuff out that I actually decided to include. So let's kick it off as we always do with our top 10 stories of the year. But first, I want to let you know you can support Evangelical Dark Web by liking this video, subscribing to the channel if you are new, and that's the least you can do. We also have, a way to become a subscriber in our Patreon-like system at evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. Now, a lot of people have been using a one-time donation for year-end giving to the Evangelical Dark Web, and we greatly appreciate the support. Maybe some of you just wanted to vote in some of the categories for the Eva Awards, and you know what? If that's what it takes, if that's what motivates you to support Evangelical Dark Web, so be it. We are thankful nonetheless. But this 2024 is going to be an exciting year for Evangelical Dark Web, and it's thanks to people like you. So, anyway, let's talk about our top 10 stories of 2023. So, my first start is the Asbury Revival. This is number 10. The Asbury Revival captured national attention for the elongated worship service that lasted 16 days at the University Chapel. Clumsy gospel presentations and hyper-emotional music are the best characterizations of this event, which captivated many, and the impact of the event has been stark ever since. Indeed, many charismatic revival type events have taken place since, but there is no set definition of revival if one is to truly occur in this downtrodden civilization. So, your thoughts at me putting Asbury at number 10?
I think it's a fair spot as far as it belongs on the list, but it is probably in the latter half. I would probably put it 10, 9 or 10 on the back half, on like the very back, like the caboose for a top 10. And it did captivate the national attention for a time period. But at the end of the day, when it comes to revivals, obviously repentance is step one, then revival, because widespread repentance is by definition a revival. It comes down to, would the church even know what to do if it had a revival? And I think that's the discussion that really needs to be had. Is,
Like a dog chasing cars?
yes, like a dog chasing the car, literally the metaphor I was going to go to. It wouldn't know what to do if it caught one. And
And to be
that's,
honest, it's our job to kind of react faithfully to what God, allows to happen in a lot of cases. But I do think there's a lot of people who want to jumpstart revivals. A lot of people in the charismatic camps want to do that. And I don't think everyone who is doing that is bad. There are, I think, some nefarious actors in that. But Asbury, I don't really think was it. And I don't see it as having a long standing impact. Uh, I see the comment is like, man, I feel like Asbury was 3 years ago, and yeah, it was 2023. We did a pretty successful live stream on it, actually. But anyway, Christian Post had this story at number 2 for the year.
I mean, I
The,
didn't check what their list
the
was, but
Gospel
that
Coalition had it
doesn't,
at number 4.
yeah.
So the Gospel Coalition's list kind of sucked. I'm just going
And
to be real, but it's the Gospel Coalition, so that's very unsurprising. The Christian Post, their list was just missing some obvious things because they just don't want to cover certain things. But my list is missing some obvious things as well, but we'll talk about that at the end. So back to the article, which is what I'm reading from for this, even though I have it printed out in front of me. This is just more proofread. Number 9, dispensationalism debate amidst the Israeli-Gaza war. The events on October 7, 2023 ignited a theological debate over modern Israel's significance in the biblical end times. In a world where everyone is being pressured to take a side, many Christians reject the notion that either side is truly good. 2023 appears to be the year where dispensationalism showcased its decline in theological prominence. October 7 was dispensationalism's best day of 2023, but the old guard that adheres to modern Israel's prophetic significance has not won over the younger generation, who explored other eschatologies and found their arguments more compelling. Moreover, it became increasingly obvious in 2023 that Zionism is a biblically untenable position to hold, as America's greatest ally has never lived up to the facade. So that's number 9.
I'm shocked that this is ninth. I would probably have it in my top 4, if not maybe even number 1. Because last year you had Ukraine and the saber rattling of the church, where the church was saber rattling for Ukraine, going on the, Putin is Russian Hitler, going to invade Europe if we don't stop him in Ukraine. And that was your number 1 because
That was my
you,
number 1.
yes, because you talked about how the saber rattling has once again reemerged, just as it did in World War One, just as it did in other periods throughout American history, Iraq, and because it's part of a long, like I guess a ongoing recurrent problem in the church is saber rattling for fruitless wars. I would have thought this would have been higher just because of the geopolitical significance.
So, as a church story, I'm not sure how high to rank it. Gospel Coalition and Christian Post had this at number 1. So, to your shock, they had it much higher than me. Now,
No, they're
as a
not going to talk
as
about
a
the
world
debate.
news story, it's much higher. But as far as the saber rattling in the church goes, it was more of a reflection of the dispensationalism debate, and we did a live stream on that when we covered like the various teachers. I mean, was it Greg Laurie was actually the least unhinged. He was the most hinged, I should say, of the ones that we covered, but we covered a lot of very cringe uh, pastoring in light of this event. But really what happened was this is reflecting that Israel is not as popular with Christians as it used to be, and Israel's popularity is not transferring over to the younger generation. So
Well, Gen Z in particular, I mean, they lost it. I mean, the neoconservatives and Zionists kind of lost a huge ground with Gen Z and even a lot of millennials. And that goes on both sides of the aisle. So that's the crazies that are pro Hamas, and then the people are just tired of America supporting Israel as a foreign policy in the Zionist wars. So I don't know how much that translates with the young Gen Z types in the church.
I mean, I see the argument that this should have been higher, and perhaps it's right that it should have been higher. But as far as a church story goes, the Israeli Gaza war, the saber rattling didn't come as much. It was more like you had to take a side, and it also happened very late in the year. So, which which is hard to judge. So, there's a lot here, but how much are we going to be talking about this type of event and its impact on the church a few years from now?
I
At
mean,
least with the Ukraine one from last year, it's very much seemed like we're going to go back and repeat history.
well, I
And
mean,
now you
the
got, people like Charles Haywood saying, the best thing for the average American is a Russian victory in Ukraine. So I just thought that was a fascinating take from one of the most fascinating guests that I've ever had on the live stream. But
I mean, it's fair to say that we'll probably be rehashing this entire debate before the end of this decade because Hamas and Israel will go at it yet again. Like,
So,
there
one
isn't,
conspiracy theory is that Hamas is basically allowed by Israel to exist for their military industrial complex and their narratives, which I actually think is probably the most compelling thing because who actually controls the imports and everything that Hamas gets is the Israeli government. They control the ports in Gaza.
well, I don't think they have a
So how are
port.
they,
So.
getting all these bombs and munitions under there? It's like I don't know. You got to think that this is a very easy land to surveil, and all of a sudden, the surveillance doesn't work. Again, because it's like what 5 miles wide. It's not very wide, but so there's my conspiracy theory. But we're going to be talking about this for another 10 years because I don't think Israel's actually going to finish the job. And whether
Yeah, I
that's
mean, we
because of
could have,
international pressure, it's like, you a European war. Now that when was the last time that happened?
well, the 90s.
Okay, well, yeah, Yugoslavia and Bosnia and Kosovo and all that good stuff in that region, but doesn't happen super often. But Israeli and Gaza, this is kind of a perennial
A
thing.
decade, every decade has its outbreak.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of that,
Seen
but
it before, but the news cycle, I think, was certainly more ramped up this time around than it would have been in their little 2014 skirmish.
so
Not
I understand that I probably went too low on this as far as the ranking goes. So I do want to move on to the next story, which is Andy Stanley. We got Andy Stanley's promotion of homosexuality. Andy Stanley has been one of the most prominent false teachers in the 21st century. In 2012, Andy Stanley would openly affirm homosexuality in a sermon, but little was made of that at the time. Instead, multiple clips surfaced in early 2023 showcasing his compromise. Moreover, his church would host a massive gay affirming conference in September. Most of Christian media ran cover or obfuscated Andy Stanley's position, but even with this, Andy Stanley continued to double down on sodomy. Perhaps Andy Stanley was butthurt that his apostasy had not received enough attention in recent years. So that's my hot take on Andy Stanley. Uh,
I mean,
he wants more attention.
I think this is a big story with side B in the U.S. church,
There's a
and
few stories
the
that are related to
debate
side
on
B
Andy
here.
Stanley went pretty consistent throughout the year. Obviously, you had people that circled the wagons for Andy Stanley. You had people that basically came out and condemned him that probably did not condemn him before, even though the evidence was not much changed.
Yeah, it seems like Christian Post is probably the people that switch sides to obfuscating Andy Stanley to actually saying, no, he's out of whack. But Ed Stetzer is still firmly defending his boy, Andy Stanley.
So, I mean, it does seem like there was a little bit more of a code red put out on him.
Yes, and that I think is more significant, is one of the most significant aspects to the story.
And it also helps that, I guess it's not, maybe not helps, but his father dying this year. I
Yes.
mean, there's nothing that might say, well, you're not going to say out of respect for your father anymore because the father's no longer in the picture. So, I mean,
It was a confluence of events that made this happen. Old clips surfacing, but they weren't like old. I think they were like within the last 2 years, clips surfacing. And then you had his conference, which, Saddleback Church was also tied to at
yeah,
one
that
point
the
in time.
conference is a big deal because that was
And
essentially
then,
this year's Revoice.
right. So that was basically this year's Revoice, and it was very gay affirming. There's no doubt about it. The reports out of Protestia, and even that Sean McDowell live stream that we covered on Evangelical Dark Web, and Sean McDowell's in compromise as well because he promotes side B theology, but even he said that went too far. So that was a very unifying event for everyone who's not under the influence of Ed Stetzer, basically. So That was number 8. Number 7 is the SBC passes Mike Law Amendment. So the Southern Baptist Convention passed the Mike Law Amendment on the floor of the convention. The amendment would signify that churches with female pastors are not in friendly cooperation with the Southern Baptist Convention and would lead to the Credentials Committee having grounds for their removal. Yet the past liberal SBC presidents, in alphabetical order, Gaines, Greer, Litton, Luter, and Merritt, devised a scheme to neuter the amendment by redefining cooperation so that their liberal allied churches could continue being Southern Baptist. The Mike Law Amendment faces a tough ratification battle in 2024, as it must also contend with the Liberal Cooperation Committee now. The urge to purge may soon be realized in the SBC and may save the denomination from decline. So obviously, there's huge implications here with the Mike Law Amendment. I believe this was on the Gospel Coalition's list. I didn't write it down in my notes, but I believe this was on there.
I mean, this certainly belongs on the list, or at least the general narrative of the SBC combating the feminist preachers in the pulpit. And that's, I mean, you have this one and then Rick Warren after that. I might have combined the two if I was to break it down.
Two
but
separate stories, and I have a reason for that.
Fair enough.
So
But
I'll explain that on Rick Warren's turn.
But I mean, obviously, this is a significant change for the SBC, and getting them to pass an amendment, which will probably pass again in the next session. Because
So I think the Mike Law Amendment will pass. However, the recommendations of the Liberal Committee will also pass.
Well, yeah, I mean,
in my mind, I think
whatever happens passes. I mean, that's just how it works.
The idea that you're going to redefine friendly cooperation with this amendment that says they're not in friendly cooperation, that is going to be very interesting to watch. And we'll be live streaming that.
It is a nice amendment. Just, would like to see how they enforce it.
Right.
Whether they even will.
Because they're being lectured in the Southern Baptist Convention about having the urge to purge. We can't have the urge to purge. We shouldn't be celebrating throwing out apostate churches. Like, yes, we should. We should be celebrating ousting apostate churches. We shouldn't be celebrating the fact that they're apostate, no, but we should be celebrating taking biblical action on apostate churches.
I mean, theoretically, we should be celebrating St. Nicholas punching Arius in the face,
and we do that every year. That's Christmas, right? That's the origin of Christmas, right? No, it's not, but that's the origin of St. Nick. So this story would be higher if it was a final ratification, and this could be a top 10 story next year, and probably will. So going back to the list, number, was it 6? The defeat of Rick Warren's Saddleback Church. Rick Warren has been the most influential Southern Baptist pastor in the last 40 years, yet his time in the SBC ended not with a bang, but with a wheeze. Warren sounded tired and angry as he posited his fresh arguments for women pastors that fell on deaf ears. The biggest star alive in the SBC was ousted for leading his church astray, and you love to see that. So, like I said, this issue's slightly different, and it gets in at number 6 because the Southern Baptist Convention just defined Rick Warren's legacy. They basically said, "Depart from me. We don't know you anymore." And you love to see that. This is a major statement on the legacy of Rick Warren and his purpose-driven life. So this is a Rick Warren story. That his
you're arguing that
massive
the legacy of Rick Warren has essentially been more or less killed this year.
Yes.
Because I might say, okay, Rick Warren was kind of a shot deer, a deer that was shot, and then in 2022, and then it just continued on into 2023 and dies then. So a lot of the groundwork would have been laid in 2022.
No, he got applauded in the convention in 2022. And we were not sure that he would get, The fact that he got like 13% support, or was it 11%? Either way, the fact that he got that high of support was unknown going into this convention. I think a lot of people thought this was going to be a lot closer, but it turned out not to be much closer than that. It was very disparate. But the fact is, he still got the most of a pass compared to every other church that got this fellowship that day. More people voted to overrule the credentials committee's decision, which is also kind of sad. So, with that said, number 5, The Chosen goes gay. While The Chosen has always been a show about grown men talking about their feelings, being gay was not a dot connected because the Mormon question loomed so large. Yet when The Chosen touted a gay flag in their promotional video, the backlash they received was immense. Dallas Jenkins responded by doubling down on sodomy promotion, claiming that The Chosen is not a ministry at all while having used a nonprofit ministry to crowdfund the production and marketing of his for-profit company. There is trouble in paradise with The Chosen, and people are waking up. So The Chosen cracks in the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, given the significance and cultural impact that the show has, it certainly does warrant a spot in the top 10. Um, Obviously, this made a lot of headlines in places that you don't necessarily expect The Chosen to be talked about. Like Daily Wire had the piece by Zaslav that got denounced, absolutely denounced by Jeremy Boring. You had other.
Yes, which led to Ben Zeisloff leaving, and Ben Zeisloff is now at the Republic Sentinel, or the Sentinel as they call it, and he's doing a very good job at that. He's breaking a lot of stories that are of significance to audiences like this, and this story actually had a major impact in a way that is completely unrelated to The Chosen itself. It had a major impact on Christian media, and as far as The Chosen goes, some people who are enamored with The Chosen actually woke up because of this story here. And I think this is a major boo-boo on The Chosen's, complete resume. Like, this is a major boo-boo that apparently, wantonly contradicting scripture on minute details all day long doesn't wake people up, but gave, little bit of a gay flag on set. People woke up to the bad messaging of The Chosen.
And then you double down on it, like, which is the other thing is they didn't just say, "Yeah, we messed up." They doubled down and said, "Yeah, we're okay with him having it there."
Yeah, it's free speech, and which is a ridiculous argument when you're talking about in the workplace, and it's certainly a bona fide qualification to not allow that in a Christian set. And then he wants to claim this isn't a ministry, even though all of that money is coming from a ministry called the Come and See Foundation, because they've gotten away from Angel Studios. So The Chosen and Angel Studios are kind of at war because the Mormons want more control, and Dallas Jenkins is getting control away from the Mormons. He created his own app, his own Chosen app, and he created his own fundraising apparatus for The Chosen outside of the crowdfunding model of Angel Studios. So, and they've been pushing that hard. So for him to say that this isn't a ministry, even though you created, not him specifically, because that might, be a boo-boo on tax law, but they created a nonprofit to fund The Chosen. It's a 501c3 ministry, and it can really only exist because of the religious qualifications. So it does not hold water. He is a liar. And, my thoughts on Dallas Jenkins, that's the kind of person he is. He's a snake. Watch out for him. So that cracks number 5. It was also guaranteed. A lot of people wanted to see videos on that. So I had a lot of things to keep in mind. How well did an article do? Or how well did a video on this do? And stuff like that you have to take into account. I did not look at the other two gospel coalitions or Christian Post list before really doing my own list. I've been kind of keeping tabs all year, but The Chosen, I think, is a major story, and it's much broader in evangelicalism than even just evangelicalism, even in terms of its scope and appeal. So you love to see it being kind of exposed. So number 4, we got the death of Tim Keller. Tim Keller has been one of the most influential evangelical figures in the last 40 years, and was a wolf, and his ministry was clearly marked by getting worse over time. Liberals from the beginning, Liberal from the beginning, Keller promoted theistic evolution, biologos, social justice, side B theology, and the effeminate witness showcased by the Gospel Coalition. The Gospel Coalition unveiled the Tim Keller Center for Cultural Apologetics, which featured multiple side B theology proponents. His subsequent death allows Christians to mark his legacy as the wolf he was all along. So
I guess this is high up on the list simply
number 4,
because of the legacy of Tim Keller.
I think his death also has a major impact. Because if you think about it, this is Tim Keller we're talking about. There's a bit of a triumvirate with evangelicalism. That was John MacArthur, Tim Keller, and John Piper. Now, that's a pretty bad triumvirate. Even though I think John MacArthur is more helpful than not helpful, that's a pretty bad triumvirate because he's not balanced out at all. I don't think John Piper's all that smart. I think he's a midwit of all midwits. I think Tim Keller's, an obvious wolf, super liberal. So we don't have good leadership in evangelicalism, and Tim Keller's death opens up a hole for someone else to rise up in that space. Is it Doug Wilson? Is it James White? Is it Vodi Bakum, all the way from Zambia? Who knows? But this is clearly going to shake things up.
People, especially the casuals in the pews, that they might need to learn more about Tim Keller. And I think the easiest way to really have that conversation is to begin with theistic evolution, that he was wrong on every major issue facing the church, beginning with creation, and just start there. Because again, most of those people are going to be your classic young earth creationists there. And they probably might even have like a mistrust of anything that deviates from that. So I think for anyone that wants to have that conversation with a casual or a normie, that would be your avenue to start, and then go into the liberalism.
The Christians who pioneered the current homeschool movement did so because of evolution.
Yeah.
And now we are riding their wave as parents nowadays, as it's not just theistic evolution that's an issue, Darwinian evolution. It's also all the gender and race crap that they're shoving in schools. So, Tim Keller's wrong on all that too. And people want to say, he was orthodox on biblical sexuality. He wrote The Meaning of Marriage, which isn't actually a terrible book, by the way. But he's also undermined that book ever since. If you've seen his more recent comments on marriage, a lot of that kind of runs afoul of his book. And again, he promoted side B theology. That's kind of undeniable. Like, you can draw a straight line from the Gospel Coalition to the Revoice Conference. It's not that hard. There's a lot of things connected there. And I've actually been working on like a flow chart for this. So we're going to do that one of these days in 2024. So you have that to look forward to. But yeah, Tim Keller's legacy needs to be marked. This does open up sort of an influential power vacuum in evangelicalism. So yes, this is a major story. Gospel Coalition had it at number 8. So I guess maybe they didn't want to be too self-serving. Your thoughts on that, on their ranking?
I mean, that's a fair ranking.
I mean, not with the other stuff they had ahead of it.
No, that notwithstanding.
ChatGPT, is that really?
They had that?
Yes.
That's like
that's been on their top 10 like multiple years in a row.
That's like last year's news.
See, AI doesn't crack my top 10. I don't even know if it cracks my top 15. Number 3, Anglican Church removes Church of England's first among equal status. To an American, it may seem ho-hum, but the Church of England being stripped of first among equal status in the global Anglican communion is a major victory in the battle for Anglicanism. The unprecedented maneuver was led by the global South, mainly African bishops who reject British buggery. So that is our number 3, is a major event out of the Anglicans church.
I
So
mean,
you're,
the Church of England went like way over the top this year to, I guess, endorse gayness, and obviously the Africans struck back. So I mean, it is a major decision that impacts a lot of Christians that we don't necessarily talk about every day, especially not here in the U.S.
yeah, I mean, I'll bring up some other denominations whose news I just left out, or
Because
that gets left out of the top 10. But this is actually pretty significant because the Anglican Church moves slowly. So for such a landmark event to have happened is actually a pretty big story. And that's a very much big event. The Anglicans are, in the global South are basically saying, yeah, we're not going along with you in that gay stuff. And the Church of England's gone really gay this year, and they don't want a part of that. That's a pretty big story for them. I love to celebrate victories in the church, and that is a victory in the church. Uh, Anything else to say on this one? We did a live stream on this with the other Paul several months ago.
I mean, he would be the one to speak on behalf of the Anglicans. But obviously, I mean, if you're going to leave out other churches, like one would be like the Methodists. Well, the Anglicans are probably a little bit, better theologically than the Methodists. And
Well, we'll talk about the Methodists in a second. But number 2, papists go gay. While gay priests have been a problem, actually, let me make sure I'm sharing this. While gay priests have been a problem for the Catholic Church for quite some time, gay doctrine being explicitly sanctioned by the Pope himself is unprecedented. This year, the Jerome Bible Commentary for the 21st Century had a foreword written by Pope Francis. The contents inside obfuscated verses on homosexuality, and placated modern audiences. Following this up, the Pope sanctioned blessing gay couples in December. Indeed, the Roman Catholic Church may be the first prominent denomination to embrace sodomy before female pastors.
I mean, the Catholics have had what's called the Lavender Mafia. That's their term for how many decades, and obviously, when you basically deny celibate priest, or when you mandate celibate priest against biblical instructions from the apostle, it leads to a lot of open doors that shouldn't be opened. And again, they've had, and the blessing problem comes from their just misunderstanding of grace, and I guess how they allow the priest to extend grace and blessing from God as like an intermediary.
Yeah, their term for blessing is very weird, but make no mistake, they're talking about blessing gay couples, but not blessing the union. It
Well,
doesn't make sense. They're blessing them as a couple, but not as a union.
the
This doesn't make
announcement
sense. It
before
is
that,
a compromise.
but the announcement before that with the transgender could basically be a member in good standing, that as so long as it didn't provide scandal. It pretty much left a lot of leeway to the individual priest to make the decision on whether or not to baptize like a gay adopted child. And again, that comes from a misunderstanding of grace, because they believe that the baptism actually gives grace directly from God, that baptizing a newborn gives grace. And then
Yeah, but
confirmation does too.
paedobaptism properly understood, you don't baptize babies of non-believers. That's just not how paedobaptism works.
So,
But yeah,
so
Catholic Church doesn't seem to care anymore.
so they offered a lot of a pretty much carte blanche guidance to basically saying that a priest can make the determination on whether or not an action like a baptism or confirmation would lead to a scandal in their terminology, which again is heavy language in Catholic doctrine, but it is a lot of leeway to the priest to just make those decisions on the ground. And obviously the blessing is more leeway to the priest.
Yeah, so they're giving a lot more discretion to the priests, but they've also been purging, better Catholic priests, so to speak, the more orthodox priests they've been purging this year.
Yes, I think
So
the
this has not been
Texas
a good year for the Catholic Church. Maybe we'll get, you know, a Catholic dissident on next year to kind of give their explanation.
and keep in mind,
Um,
his face died this year, Benedict or Ratzinger. And, had he held out, he would have been Pope and died this year. And then Francis or Bergoglio probably would never have been Pope because his health condition is pretty bad and basically is a repeat headline risk of his lungs and other faculties. So, I mean, you would have a different Pope in the Vatican had Ratzinger.
I mean, I don't know how easy it is to get a pope elected, and I certainly don't know how guaranteed the next runner up is. Like, how much is intercardinal politics when it comes to this guy's going to be the next pope? Like, I don't know how much that really plays into it. Versus, is it more like the Republican Party nominating a speaker when the first two nominees have failed? Is it more like that?
Well, I mean, I know they went through a lot of
And
effort
they
to not
just
have
find
a.
Mike Johnson because he's helping to run the committee that they're convening in.
Well, they want an African pope, so that was part of it
Or
because
they
the
didn't want
Africans
an
are.
African. They
But
wanted a
yeah, I
South.
mean, you would imagine like there's a huge what if Ratzinger held on, died this year, and then you'd have a completely different Catholic Church, maybe,
All right.
or there's just
So number one story is also at number 4 from last year. It's Christian nationalism rises. Christian nationalism had many books and multiple conferences addressing the ancient theology under a new name. In 2023, the side that held the line against critical race theory fractured as it became clear that not all who opposed critical race theory did so on principle, but rather to protect an earlier stage of liberalism. G3 Ministries became the embodiment of this split, and their credibility tanked with their preferred allies and atheists, leading to their discrediting. The actual G3 conference was marred by Owen Strand's woke revert. The Christian news cycle was dominated by Christian nationalism, but each attack only made it get stronger. Christian nationalists piled up W's around the world in Uganda, Hungary, and some U.S. states. The revitalized political theology is only getting started. So I had this at number 1. Your thoughts on
I
Christian
mean,
nationalism rises?
the whole debate, I think, is worthy at the number one spot. And obviously, it's not necessarily the most. I mean, it's a mixed bag as far as positives and negatives because you didn't want the. But I
No,
mean, the
there's
whole.
there's some of that is it rose, but at the expense of the coalition that stood against critical
Yeah,
race theory. And that's not exactly a positive development. But some of these people didn't, as I kind of pointed out, they didn't oppose critical race theory because they had a principled objection to it, or really a biblical objection to it, more so that it was against their current liberalism. Like Owen Strand going liberal again, trying to attack white people again, like this is 2020 and June of 2020, like, didn't necessarily see that coming, but and he started out really woke too, but he was pretty conservative for a few years there. So this isn't, there is something solemn about this, that we're not happy that this previously strong coalition is split, but there are we do need a leadership shakeup, and part of this has to do with John MacArthur. And I don't mean that John MacArthur is attacking Christian nationalism. I mean that he is old, and people are posturing for his influence when he dies. They want to be his spiritual successor, so to speak. They want to have his platform and, maybe grow into it. But, that's really what this is about, is market share. And I think a lot of this is, really disingenuous at the end of the day. So the people in G3 don't like the people like Joel Webbin rising. They don't like the people like John Harris rising. John Harris doesn't necessarily adopt the label, but there's the, disestablishment or evangelical dissidents that they don't want rising. They viewed themselves as the apparatus for rising through the ranks. They basically, G3 was created to be its own version of the Gospel Coalition, and now they're acting like the Gospel Coalition.
Yeah, and again, I don't think the debate is even so much theological, so much as it is political, and just a lot of these people don't know what the signs of the times, or they simply don't want to touch certain third rails. The most prominent being, I would say, the Great Replacement. I think that's one of the main issues is that find me the guy at G3 that's anti-Christian nationalist that actually affirms replacement theory. That's a very small Venn diagram. And I think certain third rail issues are the issues that really prevent them. Because again, if they opened up their, the dead theologians from 200 plus years ago, then they would probably have the same conclusions, or at least they would see that the conclusions of the Christian nationalist side are not novel.
Right, and that's basically Stephen Wolf's book. Now, that book came out in 2022, correct?
Yes.
Okay, it feels like a long time ago.
I mean, it's living in a lot
But
of people's heads rent free. So.
In 2023, it's basically been one of the most influential books in this movement in 2023 as well. And by movement, I'm not just talking about Christian nationalists. I'm talking about like the broader conversation is still having one of the biggest impacts that a book could have. But even despite that, you see Rob Reiner's documentaries not using that book's definition of Christian nationalism. The Neighborly Faith study on Christian nationalism that we covered last week isn't using that definition of Christian nationalism, which, I like my definition a little better, but it's basically the same definition reworded. But,
Or
people
even
talked
like,
about heavenly good being bad. I remember some people, I believe it was the Rob Reiner or no, it was Holy Post. I was like, earthly good. No, we can't be talking about earthly good being good. So a lot of they don't have their ducks in a row as far as an argument goes, because there's some people that want to, they're basically just liberals, and then there's some people that are, basically trying to their own version of Big Eva. And I do think that there might be some principled opponents to Christian nationalism, but that number is a lot smaller than it looks. So, David Morrill, I saw him in the chat. He is definitely one of them. But there's at least common ground there with someone like David. There's not necessarily, I don't know how much common ground there is with Owen Strachan. And I didn't like to see what happened with G3, but it was one of those things where these people aren't acting out of theological conviction, because when they try to act on theological conviction, they're trying to make it a debate about eschatology, when the leading Christian nationalists are probably a millennial,
no,
probably an optimistic millennial. They're not post-mill, because post-mill is caught up on theonomy. A lot of post-millers are caught up on theonomy. I think Christian nationalism is superior to theonomy.
yeah, I mean, and to use Wolf's own explanation, because he has a whole paragraph in the book on why he's not a theonomist, and it's because he believes that particularity transcends the theonomic, I guess, one size fits all that I guess is common with a lot of like the Rushdoony types that basically think, oh, having prisons is bad or certain types of laws are bad, whereas the Wolf's argument would be that nations should direct their laws towards God. So any step in the right direction is good, and that would be verbatim what Calvin's theology is. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Wolf could basically reprint Calvin's of civil government chapter, and basically they would still freak out, even though that book assumes that commanding the first or enforcing the first table of the law is a prerequisite to ordering your nation towards God. So it would basically say, you don't worship God unless it basically assumes it as a self-evident necessity that, if you're going to order your nation towards God, you have to enforce the first table. It's almost
Yes.
like if you don't do that, then you're not, then you're not really worshiping God.
And that's certainly a debate, is how much of the first table gets enforced versus the second table. I think is pretty widely accepted among Christian nationalism, or Christian nationalists. But the first tables, more of a debated issue,
But it
for
is,
sure.
I
But
mean,
at the end
there.
of the day, the Christian nationalists are not defending, satanic statues in the Iowa state capitol.
Well, I mean, and it goes back to, I mean, we revere the dead people, and then but when someone else, builds on their arguments or talks about what they said or says I affirm what they said, all of a sudden it's a foul.
Yes, we affirm, some of the dead people like Tiridates the third, who made Armenia a Christian nation before Constantine. So, it's not just Constantine was the first, that did this, and then everything was downhill from there. No, Rome was actually number 3 in nations that declared themselves overtly Christian. So, but people don't want to open up history, because let's be real, we've been lied to about history so much in the church. I was reading like a Southern Baptist, church history made easy. Maybe you've read that,
Yeah,
and it's very much Anabaptist. It says Constantine was bad and that the church had it better under Julian the Apostate. I'm like, are you kidding?
I don't even remember that.
Yes, that it said that the church had it better under Julian the Apostate than Constantine. So I guess the Council of Nicaea counts for nothing.
So I think a lot of people see the word Baptist and think, oh, I'm a Baptist, so that means I must be an Anabaptist. It
And
doesn't always
yeah,
work that
yeah,
way.
that's doesn't work that way. The 1689 Baptists were not nearly anything like the Anabaptists, who were kind of the bad guys in their situation, by the way. Um, so I don't blame the Lutherans for not liking the Anabaptists. I really don't. The more history you learn about it, the more you side with the Lutherans.
No, Calvinists shouldn't be Anabaptist at all, but considering how much Calvin wrote against the Anabaptist.
Yeah, there's a reason they wrote against the Anabaptists. The Anabaptists didn't start out as the pacifists we think of them today. Uh, and so much of, a lot of it has to do with like bad movements that reshape themselves through history. And Ancient Pat's TV, that's a apologetics channel. Just want to make sure I'm getting it right. Ancient Pat's TV on YouTube did a very good documentary on loser theology, I thought, in my opinion. So they covered a lot of this. They did a really good job. So, but yeah, we're lied to on history. You look at John Hagee's book, he just openly lies about church history. Like, this book just openly lies. He claims that, Constantine made Christianity the official religion of Rome. Like, that is a bold-faced lie that should not have been allowed to have gotten published because of how factually untrue that was. But again, he lies on a lot of things in that book, and it shows. So a lot of Christians don't know church history. They don't know history in general, in part because our public school system doesn't teach a whole lot of history. And it's hard to teach a whole lot of history, but there's a lot of areas that just go completely neglected. And I think Rome is one of them. So that concludes our list of top 10 stories. So let's kind of talk about what was left out. So, what is left out? Here's just a list of what got cut. The Covenant school shooting, which Christian Post had at number 3.
I would have had that in a top 10 because I do think it was a
What are you taking
significant.
out?
We could reduce Rick Warren. We could reduce the death of Tim Keller. I mean, there are some ancillary stuff that I might have consolidated or cut out, but I do think that deserves to be in because the SBC also worked to hide the Tranifesto, or
Yes, they did.
so.
The Brent Leatherwood led the charge, claiming and lying, in my opinion, based on my birdies. He does not represent all parents, but really the principal and maybe one family. They don't want that getting out there. So, and David, is in. There's a cover up surrounding the Covenant shooting, and yes, this is a cover up. This isn't, and it might not necessarily be entirely about the shooting itself, but something else involving
Well, it goes to show
that
you that.
school and those people.
Well, it also goes to show you that the left will gladly put a bunch of people on antidepressants and hormones and other like transgenderist medicine, and they'll let them loose in society. And again, the correlation between mass shootings and SSRI medication is strongly established as far as you just look at the
Causation isn't
profile.
correlation isn't causation
And they want to
fallacy.
talk about guns because they don't want to actually talk about the fact that the side effects of certain
So
medications includes.
when I first heard that, people making that argument, my assumption was, well, these people are on these drugs, but it's the person that, people are just putting these people on these drugs. So the drugs aren't necessarily a causal factor. But if you think about how these drugs affect the brain, I do think it is
Suicidal
much.
ideation is a side effect.
It's kind of like, to a mass shooter, these types of drugs are like amphetamines to the German army invading France. It makes it a whole lot easier. So, to be up for 40 hours invading France, it makes it a whole lot easier to take amphetamines and do that. And I think, the SSRIs and all that other stuff, they make it easier for people to do violence.
And that's without getting into the
Right.
science behind whether they're even effective medicine or just profitable medicine.
Yeah, I don't think antidepressants work.
And
They've also done
what is it?
studies that say they don't,
Yeah,
that
Children's Health Defense had a
depression
whole
isn't actually
article on
caused
that.
by a chemical imbalance.
Serotonin imbalance,
So, the NIH published that study, I believe, last year.
something like that.
But yeah, but that's how we treat it. So, and lastly on this is, can't blame the guns if the motive was personal. And yes, it was a person, like, it wasn't by accident that these people died. So that was left off, and that's probably the biggest story that I left off, in my opinion. He Gets Us campaign was also left off. At the end of the day, it's just not. It didn't make the cut.
I mean, it was a big thing with the Super
It was a
Bowl.
huge story for Evangelical Dark
Yeah.
Web, the website and the channel, but at the end of the day, it doesn't make the cut.
And not to toot my own horn, but we did probably have the best research in the industry on that one. Because again, even if you watch like mainstream conservative media, they didn't have the in-depth research that we had.
I mean, just going to town on the Green family from Hobby Lobby, and now they're also involved with the Come and See Foundation for the Chosen. So that the overlap between the Chosen and the He Gets Us campaign, wow, it's increasingly becoming a circle. So you love this. You hate to see that, really. Another one is UMC divorce. That doesn't make the list, and I don't know why it should, to be honest, because we got to remember the UMC is not getting a divorce because of support for homosexuality. They're getting a divorce because of support for homosexual pastors. They've already supported, homosexuality, and they have for decades. This is about gay pastors in the Methodist Church. And now they're drawing the line that we're not allowing gay pastors after we already allow gay theology. So
I mean,
really
it's a story
not that significant.
It's a story that might make a top 20, but it's not a top 10.
Yeah, it's not a top 10.
And again, the Methodists a lot of them are still going to be very apostate. They're still going to be pro female pastors. And so, I mean, you get rid of, even if you cut out the ones that aren't like gay affirming on the pastor, there still might be a lot of problems left in that remnant.
So another story that I wanted to be in the top 10, but it just doesn't make the cut. Christian movies was a pretty good year for Christian movies. Just to name a few, let me pull up my original article. So we had Big George Foreman, which I thought was a very good movie, a very good boxing movie. Jesus Revolution was a very surprising movie to me. I actually thought it was pretty good. For a movie that was showing a very small window of time. Like, obviously, we're not going to go into all of Lawton Frisbee's dealings in personal life, but I thought it was a very balanced take. I thought it was a pretty good movie, actually. Nefarious, which is Steve Dace's movie, does have the fatal flaw of having a not good ending, but I thought it was a pretty compelling way to tell.
Yeah, I mean,
adapt some very difficult source material.
Sean Patrick Flannery, who is like, in like the realm of guy and bro movies. I mean, Boondock Saints is like a total bro movie, and having that guy in there as Nefarious was an absolute score.
And we also have The Blind, which was Phil Robertson movie. I have not seen that yet, but I've heard very good things about it. And you know what's funny? Like Christian posted the 7 best faith movies of the year, and they had that gay musical like coming Journey to Bethlehem on it, which even the Gospel Coalition said was too cringe. So if you're too cringe for the Gospel Coalition, that's not a good. That's not a top 7 movie. They did not have Big George Foreman, which why not? They didn't give Nefarious a good review because I don't know, smoking or something. Um, so it's like, wow, you missed some of the actual better Christian movies of this year to have some sort of chick flick and the Journey to Bethlehem musical, which was too cringe even for the Gospel Coalition.
Yeah, maybe next year they'll have the Black Jesus movie that's coming out.
Oh yeah, what's it called? Clarence, Book of Clarence.
Yes.
Someone left a nasty comment against you that I approved on the website. I think they called you racist or something for the article or something. I just funny. I don't censor any comments on the website unless they're spam. But every time a commenter comments for the first time, it goes to a review process. That's the moderation process. New commenters get moderated. But after that, you're good. As long as you keep using the same email and stuff. But and I don't censor any YouTube comments either, or block people on social media. So anyway, we also have another story: is Mike Bickle getting Me Too'd? That didn't make the cut.
Yeah, and that's probably because that's already
It's
in the
an
third
incomplete
rail.
story. It's Mike Bickle. So how influential is IHOP overall? He's not as big as Tim Keller, who's on the list, or Rick Warren, who made the top 10.
I mean, it's already into apostate swim lane, so yeah, it's not a
Yeah.
top 10.
And then Charles Stanley's death is the last item that I have that didn't make the cut. There's a way that I wanted to combine that with Tim Keller's death, but I think Tim Keller's death standalone is a top 10 story because of the power vacuum. So those are my thoughts.
Good.
So that concludes our top 10 list. Now let's get on to the Eva Awards. Now, some of these categories were voted in by the people who support Evangelical Dark Web. And I gotta say, we've done some snap polls on these items before the recent days for the final polls, and you guys completely disregarded the earlier polls results and just said, nah, I'm feeling different today. So it's going to lead to some shocking results in my mind. But we have Best Teacher. I want to hear your nomination.
All right, so I went with a friend of the channel, Dr. Jared Moore, for his book on sex and theology, and making the
lust of the flesh
and making concupiscence a in vogue term again. And obviously, he took on the debate with Doug Wilson, and he started, kind of made a big name for himself this year. So I do think he
debated Doug Wilson this year.
Yes, that was January, I think.
Wow.
So yeah, it has been a long year.
A long time ago, and he won that debate too.
So I do think, as far as Best Teacher goes, the guy that's talking about concupiscence and trying to bring us back to the true, I guess, understanding of sin, I think that deserves a top spot for Best Teacher.
All right. Wow, that was a good nomination. Mm-hmm. I had Andrew Isker, author of the Boniface Option. He also defeated Doug Wilson in a debate. So I guess they both have that in common. What if it's not envy? I guess is the quote that became a meme. I actually loved his book because it's very practical. It's basically I wouldn't want to say it's a sequel to Stephen Wolf's book, but in terms of more practical understanding, I gave it a very good review at Evangelical Dark Web for sure. I know you didn't like his first book on Christian nationalism very much, which he co-authored with Andrew Torba, but this book I found was very practical. There's only one chapter that I thought was wanting. I wanted more out of that.
And I will say I've softened my I guess, reflections on his first book. I mean, I do like the notion. I might wish he called it Christian nationalism and the parallel economy, but I mean, I do am a lot more sympathetic to the parallel economy argument as far as, if you just build, eventually the system will collapse and you can take over. I do
Man,
think
my
it's
most
actually a
nervousness, my biggest hesitation on that is what the, whole dollar is part of the collapse. How am I going to sell things if no one has money and purchasing power to buy? Or do I just close up operations with low overhead and stuff? You know, thoughts that are on my mind about that. Uh, I think this is Andrew Isker's year.
no. I got to go with Jared Moore though.
All right, put in the chat who you want to give that award to. I do want to pull up worst teacher because I think worst teacher is Andy Stanley.
Yeah, we're in agreement there. I
So
mean,
Andy
this was
Stanley
his
gets
year.
worst teacher. And the reasons are obvious. He doubled down on his support for homosexuality. He did a conference at his church that was promoting homosexuality in the church. Clearly, he's the worst teacher of the year. He stood out above all the others this year. Last year, I remember it being a harder competition, but this year,
Wasn't
I don't
last
even
year
have
Rick Warren?
I don't even have a dishonorable mention this year. It's just Andy Stanley. I think he clearly earned it. So, without chat interference, you know what? Maybe I'm going to defer to you on a technical sense. Jared Moore's controversial teaching on concupiscence. And it's controversial because he stirs up a lot on social media. But at the same time, Andrew Isker is also a bigger platform. His book probably sold more copies. I don't have numbers or anything, but based on size, I got to give to Andrew Isker. So I'm going to overrule you on that one, but he will get a honorable mention at the runner up for that. In terms of scope of impact, I think we're going to give that to him. So Church Hero. Now, I had my thoughts on how this would go, but the people decided this question. I don't agree with the people's results and democracy. I don't agree with how that played out. But I would vote it in the event of a tiebreaker. There was no tiebreaker. And the Church Hero of the Year, we had 3 nominations put to a vote. Calvin Robertson, who won the snap poll, so he comes in at the number 1 seed. And then we had Mike Law Jr. for the Mike Law Amendment in the Southern Baptist Convention. And then we had Michael Cassidy, who took down the statue in the Iowa State Capitol. And Michael Cassidy decisively won the popular vote of the people who support Evangelical Dark Web. So, your reaction to their vote?
I mean, I had Calvin Robinson written down pretty much for the entire year because I think he's like the face of the, I guess, the face of the dissident church that's fighting in England. And obviously, he's in that Anglican, he's like a deacon in the Anglican or Church of England. I forget which.
I think he's upgraded his title.
Okay.
He's no longer a deacon. He's gotten promoted to father, I think, or whatever FR I think is the acronym. But I think he's a priest now.
But he is the face and the guy that's going to have probably a more long term impact than a Cassidy. Though I
He
do
also
think
had a stint on Great Britain News that ended because he didn't want to cancel a dude for making a I guess I forget what it was, like a slut shaming comment, which was pretty based. So I honestly would vote for Calvin Robinson personally, but the people decided Michael
and
Cassidy.
again, Michael Cassidy is the example of church hero that is more populous and more people can follow that example than they probably can a Calvin Robinson,
So
who's more the intellectual hero.
Michael Cassidy wins Church Hero of the
It
Year
was
for
a
something very late
decisive.
in yes, it was decisive. He got the majority. It wasn't a plurality either. It was a majority, which I was shocked by. Mike Law came in second, which I'm like, what? I just put that in there because he was in there the first time. But yeah, Calvin Robinson didn't get the love. So you hate to see that, but it is that's the rules. I put that up to the people. Church villain. Now, I got to be real. I did not actually, I should have put this up for a poll, but I did not.
No, no
And
need
I
to.
have a, okay, who you got?
James Lindsay as
So,
church villain of the year. We're letting an atheist decide theology, and at the end of the day, we're trusting in someone that hates Christians and Christianity more than he, hates wokeness. Because at the end of the day, he just wants 2015, abortion up until birth and gay
gay
marriage.
marriage and women in the workplace controlling things.
So he just basically wants to revert the clock
He's
back to
also woke on gender, and we did
yes,
that video. He's woke on gender. He does not believe that gender and sex are the same thing.
which
So,
he's
which is
taking the
by definition woke on gender.
and he's taking the the gender spectrum, which is basically the contribution of John Money, who was a sadist. So the fact that
Uh,
he has influence in the church makes him a villain, and not enough people are willing to call him out or do call him out per se. And
so my list is teetering between James Lindsay, Rick Warren, and Michael O'Fallon. Now, Michael O'Fallon's more of an behind the curtains type of guy. Rick Warren is the villain that got bested, but was he the best villain?
not of this year. This
Like
wasn't
I
his
said,
year.
he went out with a wheeze, not a bang.
Yeah, this isn't the emperor going
Like
down
he
a
was
hole.
like, man, he's struggling to breathe up there, type of low energy, high anger. There's just nothing there anymore. Old man yelling at cloud, energy. And I think you're right. James Lindsay was also on my list of nominations. I just didn't decide on one, and I think James Lindsay gets it. So if you think James Lindsay should get it, and I think that he's one of the people that should get it, I think he has a clear best case. This is his year, so make it so. James Lindsay, Church Villain of the
And he's
Year.
way too platformed in even like conservative media. Obviously, he got to speak at a pastors conference for TPUSA was speaking at their America Fest, I think. So I mean, his influence on the right is
And he's also, I believe, now on the advisory board of Moms for Liberty, which is a very scandaled operation right now because, their founder loves to be a swinger,
so. This is not
apparently.
someone that's on the decline.
Yeah, so he got his way in there. And his, company, New Founding, is bankrolled by Michael O'Fallon, who founded it, actually, not James Lindsay. So, or sorry, is it New Discourses, not New
New
Founding?
discourses.
Duh, New Founding's one of the good guys. New Discourses is James Lindsay's organization that was founded by Michael O'Fallon. So, best church, I really didn't have one, like a single church that stood out.
I chose Mid Vermont Christian School. I mean, it was founded by a church. I don't know if that counts as a loophole, but I said them because they took on the state of Vermont regarding children or youth sports. And let's be honest, sacrificing women's basketball is not a big sacrifice. Yet too many in the church are not willing to forego even a a student's basketball game
Mid
to
Vermont, what church?
vid no mid Vermont Christian School. That's the best church. I mean, I'm sure they do chapel services, but the idea that this school took on the state of Vermont, they're probably going to succeed in their lawsuit because they got kicked out of all sports and even athletic competitions or academic
Even
competitions.
for male on male sports.
Well, even something like a debate club, they got kicked out of
Wow.
for taking a stand on the gender issue. So the fact that they did that and were willing to sacrifice what many even Christian schools around the country aren't willing to sacrifice, or even Christian colleges or so-called Christian colleges. I mean, they set the example that if you're not willing to sacrifice something that is in the grand scheme of things trivial, like women's sports, then you're not willing to actually fight.
And it's funny because so much of this issue is being framed as we must save women's sports. It is the end all be all. It's the highest good in society type of rhetoric. And that's certainly, the rhetoric you hear from Nikki Haley. It's like, this is the women's rights issue of our day. It's like, oh, so woke. But
No,
you're actually saying it's the opposite. It's so trivial. We should be, willing to sacrifice it for the
Yeah,
greater cause.
it's literally a chess piece we can sacrifice. Hey, if you're willing to take this out, that's fine. We'll
And
win.
you're right. If we want to reverse the decline of civilization, or reverse the slippery slope in our favor, then this is the chess piece to do
That's a
the
chess piece that's sacrifice that
grand
you can
opening,
sacrifice.
pawn to e5 or whatever. So I don't know how to do the technical chess
Like
speed,
if you're not
but
willing
you're
to,
moving it 2 places to advance
I mean,
your
you're literally
side and
saying
open your move.
it's like playing chicken. This is one we can clearly sacrifice.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Um, Worst church. This was put up to a vote, and I was also surprised by the results here.
I mean,
So the nominees. Actually, I really want to read the article that I wrote on this, but the nominees, because I was pretty creative with this one. So worst church. Earlier this year, we did a snap poll on this question. Now it is the official poll to determine the winner. Point Community Church handily won the snap poll, but Saddleback Church, the defending champs, and the perennial Transformation Church want a rematch. But in comes McLean Bible Church, which is making a last-minute push to reclaim the title that they won in the inaugural Eva Awards in 2021. So guess who won that one?
I mean, I have a different option. I
Oh,
think it trumps the. I think it trumps what the people say.
and
I had Freedom Church of Vero Beach with their Fast Times and shirtless pastor.
uh, he wears no shoes, not no shirt, actually. So let me just check in on the results for sure,
Because
because I
if this is the Tinder pastor, I mean, the Tinder pastor
so
should have a
I
swipe
voted.
right on
I
worst church.
wanted North Point Community Church to win.
I originally had them down.
McLean Bible Church won. They got a majority, actually, and I think this is recency bias. But McLean Bible Church has reclaimed their title of worst church of the year.
Well, there are a collapse that's coming because that's the whole, golden.
They won it in 2021 when all these lawsuits and stuff started, and now they've won it again. I mean, that video that I published earlier on Christmas Eve of all times is one of the is like the second highest video of the year on the channel. I mean, we don't get a whole lot of super viral content here, but we get a lot of consistent numbers on Evangelical Dark Web, but that video did the numbers. But anyway, McLean Bible Church has come out of nowhere, and they've made a last minute push to regain their title worst church. That is a comeback story because they were not in consideration a few months ago.
But they have obviously the collapse that was talked about, I guess, 2 years ago when they won. That's continued, and
So
obviously,
I think that overrides Freedom Church. That is a small church that already faced much of its decline earlier,
true.
but
But I want to
it's
give
also
us
just it's just not big enough to also be the worst church. And what they did isn't bad enough either. I don't think what what's his face did was worse than David Platt or Rick Warren
and with
or
David
Andy
Platt
Stanley.
likely on his way out, or at least in that divorce process per se, if you want to call it a divorce process.
He's got to give 60 days notice, I
Yes.
believe, is the
And
rule.
obviously he's got a documentary probably coming out in Q1 of next year, which I
That's
don't
going to
know.
be lit because they're going to be just using discovery documents. So that's going to be there's going to be a lot of good stuff in there.
So yeah, he's got a nice. He's on the guillotine.
So we got some of the more pop culture ish topics. I mean, we had a lot of the superlatives out of the way, but most overrated is I don't think you can top my most overrated, but we also might have the same most
We
overrated
might
because I
have the
think it's
same.
very obvious. You go first.
Hi, Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift, yes. Okay. We
I
had the same
originally
one. It
I
was just so
originally had
obvious. She is, you know, I'm a millennial, but I love, hard rock and metal music. And imagine being told that the Beatles are the greatest band of all time. And then you ask, what's the song that justifies the Beatles being the greatest band of all time? Like, what's their best song that would justify this lofty label? And it's like, you don't really get a clear answer on that. Like, what's the band that justifies their prowess, or the song that justifies their prowess? And Taylor Swift, at least you can name some hits. Or at least I could name some hits that would contribute to her success. But man, is she just overrated?
I mean,
She's
the
not.
Time
She
Person
doesn't
of the Year did it for me.
like. Let's be real. It's a weird phenomenon because she's not hot, so it's not like she's Britney Spears exuding sexuality. Uh, and she's a complete downgrade for Travis Kelce. In terms of hypergamy and stuff like that, and he's just doing the reverse of that. Um, it's a complete. She's not all that talented on songwriting, and much of her songs about people being mean to her, even in her good old days. But her music's increasingly demonic. It's anti-Christian.
I mean,
Uh,
really, I mean, she's a woman that's gonna hit the wall,
what is the
unmarried,
appeal?
no
And
children.
here is the appeal. She is and speaks for liberal white women who want to be single through their 30s.
Yeah,
That's her appeal.
hit the
That
wall.
is why she's astroturfed immensely. And Kanye West, what did you do? Why did you have to interrupt her? And I'm gonna let you finish. Why do you have to do that, Kanye? Uh, why you make her famous like that? No, I'm just kidding. That's not why she's famous. But it's certainly, you certainly got to wonder. Charles, telling the truth here, she's moderately attractive at best, which is, again, why is she famous? It's not because of her music. It's because of her brand and because of her greed. If you look at her practices, it's like she greedy. She has so many trademarks on very trivial phrases that are in common use. Like even like the letter T, I think is uh, trademarked or Swift. It's like, come on, that ain't gonna hold. But you like very petty levels of greed and stuff like that. So that's why she's a billionaire, actually. Um, so most underrated.
So this one, I had Arn McIntyre, who's a contributor over at the Blaze. I think he's probably the most underrated, especially in Christian circles, because we don't necessarily consider him a Christian, I guess, voice or a Christian um, commentator. But he is the guy that heightens the intellectual dialogue and can discuss political theory that is very useful for Christians. I mean, I think of a lot of the G3 types would actually listen to Aaron McIntyre. They might actually know a thing or two about politics, how power works, and basic political theory.
No, they would call him a Christian nationalist.
Even though,
Even
yeah.
I don't think he accepts the label. They
No,
would
he's
call him.
probably more like a John Harris in that lane.
Yeah, which I don't really get what term he's going to come up with that's superior, but
But yeah,
that's
I
just
mean,
me.
he
But
talent wise and intelligence wise, he has like the Rush Limbaugh talent and intelligence, probably maybe a little higher on because he's an intellectual. But he is
he's a
what we,
history teacher,
yes, or
former history teacher. But yes, that's his background, and you love to see something like that. He talked about how he had to teach. He had to the amount of effort that he had to put in to teach kids that America didn't invent slavery and stuff like that. So he had to fight a lot of this firsthand. Yeah, I'll give him that. So Aaron McIntyre wins most underrated, most underreported. So I had two things for this. What did you have?
I had the Nigerian Christians being slaughtered um, as our most. Yeah, I mean that kind of goes without saying.
Yes, I had Nigerian Christians and then I had Armenian Christians. So one of them's, I think Judge Saul, maybe someone else made the point that Nigerian Christians have been having an October 7th every year for like the past 10 years. And he talks in depth about how the Nigerian government basically covers up the extent of the atrocities committed against Christians in Nigeria. And then in Armenia, the Azerbaijani military is ethnically cleansing Armenian Christians from a disputed border territory. The Armenian president is a bit of a wuss because he doesn't want to take action to defend his people.
And that might be more underreported simply because no one is. I mean, you'll hear Christians occasionally talk about Nigeria and just stuff in Africa, but no one's talking about anything that happens in the Caucasus.
And, who's arming the Azerbaijani military? It's the Israeli government. What? Whoa. So the Israeli government would be arming an ethnic cleansing of a Christian population? Get out of town. But yeah, maybe that's why it's not covered, because you would instantly, connect the dots to that. And that goes against a lot of evangelical narratives.
Well, that and the fact that they're probably arming them.
Is Michael Brown going to write you got to be, there's no moral ambiguity about what's happening to the Armenian Christians? Would he write an article like that? No. Because it would, go back to his homeboy Israel.
Well, it's necessary to arm the genociders so that you can spy on Iran, because Iran's the worst nation in the world, apparently.
Right. So we must do evil so that good may come is basically that logic. So we both had Nigerian Christians, so I'm going to give the edge to that because we both thought of it. But perhaps, yeah, and I guess Sam Riza points out the only people talking about this are lefties. And I've been talking about it, but again, it's just not as popular of a topic.
I don't think the Biden administration is actually siding with Azerbaijan. I think they're actually siding with the Armenians.
Yes, but they aren't doing a whole lot. The Armenian president is also kind of a wuss. He's bending over for this, in my opinion. You're in a military alliance with the Russians. How about you invoke that if you're serious? So that's the most Nigerians will win, but obviously maybe this will actually be a tie and they can share the award, because both of these stories are worth covering, but we'll see. Most overreported.
I said anti-Semitism on college campuses. This is literally the definition of it's not our problem. Those aren't our voters. Like, college students at the Ivy Leagues are not voting Republican in 2024. So there's no reason that a politician should stand up for them. There's no reason our congressional representatives should be summoning people to Congress to harass them and get their sound bites. And again, they're not going to vote for us. They're not our people. And the certain group of people that are being harassed are also the people that are the boosters for these colleges. And they're the ones that had no problem funding critical race theory and the litany of anti-white.
No problem with anti-white sentiments.
They had no problem with anti-white ideologies that were prevalent on these college campuses for decades. But only when they started attacking after October 7th was it a problem.
Yeah, it was a bold strategy to assume that, Black Americans that are woke would see, Jews as not white. But that's basically the playbook that they did. And, Whoopi Goldberg got in trouble with The View for that, because she basically said that Jews were white, and therefore it wasn't a race thing and stuff like that. So she got in trouble for that, even though she, it's her. You're going to tell a Black person that this person's not white, which to white people is a different story. I think that's a different conversation among whites. But it's interesting because, what are the Palestinians they would call brown people? And it's like, yeah, you create an anti-white ideology in schools, and then you expect the brown people that are oppressed to not turn against anyone who's phenotypically white.
And again, the Republicans only cared when it affected Asians. They didn't care about white people being denied admission into Harvard or Yale because of, them being white. They only cared when it affected Asians.
So I have a different hot take, but your take might have beaten it.
Oh, the last thing I will say is the the value of the Ivy League education is also very much deflated because they just hand out A's. There's a whole scandal about how they pump up their GPAs,
Who?
Ivy Leagues. So they're inflating the GPAs. The value of the education at an Ivy League institution is not what it once was.
So mine was Vivek Ramaswamy. He was basically a candidate. He started out as sort of like an Andrew Yang figure, but then it became clear he's not actually running for president. And all of a sudden, when Vivek Ramaswamy's not running for president, he gets a whole lot of media attention. And conservative media astroturfed him to where you could see it in the actual poll numbers. And then where we're at now, he's not going to get double digits in Iowa. He's not going to qualify for the next debate. If
I mean, his
when that
campaign is
occurs.
all but suspended.
Well, yeah, and he's like, I'm going to drop out of Colorado until Trump is on the ballot again. It's like, bro, are you even still in the race when that happens? So that's a complete virtue signal. It's a meaningless gesture because he's a meaningless candidate by the time that
I mean, I
happens.
have
He's going to
Vivek.
get maybe 5% in Iowa.
I mean, I have Vivek for a different category. I don't think he's overreported. I do think he is talented. So I think I have him somewhere else in the
And that's,
superlatives.
but the thing is, he was astroturfed as a candidate. Similar to Larry Elder last year with the California recall. He was astroturfed as a candidate because it fit a message, but all of a sudden, and I think you're right, the anti-Semitism on college campuses is the more prescient example. So I'm going to give it the award for most over-reported. Biggest surprise.
I had the rapture, but obviously that didn't happen because I guess when Israel was attacked, that was the sign of the rapture that was coming. But I put that down. It didn't happen, and we're still here. But obviously, kind of with October 7th, everyone has their rapture charts out, seeing where this event fits into the end times. So
that's your biggest surprise?
I
Isn't
mean, I
that
put
more
that
like the
down as a
biggest?
joke. I didn't actually have a whole lot, but I had that down for a couple
So
months.
my biggest surprise was Jesus Revolution, the movie. I did not think it would be good, and it was good.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not
obviously,
easy. I'm not easy to surprise. Okay.
yeah, it was a decent film.
And I really like Kelsey Grammer's performance in that. Like Kelsey Grammer is like thumbs up for me. And I've never seen him in what he's probably most famous for, but everything else that I've seen him in television wise, he's been fantastic. Sideshow Bob, the Stinky Pete in Toy Story 2, just all these other things that he's done. He's been fantastic. And then he was fantastic in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that because I mean, yeah, it was pleasantly good. I mean, obviously, I wasn't surprised when I watched it simply because you had already seen it before me. So
Yeah, so the first time I watched it was kind of stressful because I'm like watching it as like the sermon blogger and stuff like that. I'm like, what sort of story is this telling? The second time is like I'm way more relaxed and can kind of look at it. Does have rewatch value,
and obviously, yeah, theologically, the stance on baptism is a little out there.
but
Not quite.
it is trying to tell a true story
Yeah. So
at the end of the day. So like their theology isn't perfect, obviously. But it does show like Kelsey Grammer's character, who's Chuck Smith, is actually the hero of the story because he limits Lonnie Frisbee's worst tendencies. And you see him put the crackdown on that in the movie, and I'm like, whoa, that was the scene that got me the most, actually, in the entire movie. And I actually love the whole theme of father, Greg Laurie's always searching for a father figure. I actually thought that was but they didn't say that explicitly. It was just something that the viewer would be intelligent enough to figure out was the theme of fatherlessness in his life, and that was basically his struggle in finding faith, I guess. I'm gonna
yeah, I
say
mean, there's a
finding
lot
God
of
because that sounds cliche, but I actually thought that this movie was the biggest surprise for me this year. So biggest disappointment.
I mean, this one I had the G3. I think it just, I mean, we already kind of had the whole conversation on why that lands the biggest disappointment, but it was probably an easy choice for me to have that down.
Wow. That completely went over my head. Like, I can't believe I missed that because the next, uh, sorry, not the next category, but in a few categories, we're going to have like a complete G3 showdown. But yeah, I was pretty undecided between Steven Crowder and Chris Roseborough. But yeah, G3 clearly takes it. Like, wow. That
I
is
mean,
way more.
Crowder obviously had a horrible beginning to the year, and obviously the video dropped. Which again, I'm not going to be the guy that says I'm not going to be the guy that white knights or
I'm not
judges
gonna judge
10 years of marriage on 3 minutes of video.
you. People don't understand how bad marriages can get and the positions that an unhealthy marriage can get into. That doesn't mean that the marriage can't be saved. But yeah, you don't want your worst areas in marriage to be, aired like that.
And
Uh,
again, it was wrong, morally wrong for her to do that, especially since she's relying on him to subsidize her life in in a post divorce scenario. So you're hurting his income, which is also your income. But that's being long term oriented.
yeah, I mean, I have a lot of reasons to be disappointed with Crowder, but
But he did do the
that part is one
Tranifesto,
of he did do the Tranifesto,
so
which was pretty solid on his
he didn't
part.
make my list in any
Chris
capacity.
Roseborough made the list because, he just started caping up for liberal Lutherans. You're all fine with calling out the prosperity people, but when there's, issues in your own backyard, that's when you have issue. That's when you're going to, swallow your whistle as a referee.
And the
You're not really a
prosperity
discernment blogger. You're just an establishment,
and the
you know,
prosperity charismatic stuff is
controlled voice,
is
basically.
fish in a barrel.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
And again, a lot of and to their credit, a lot of those people might come out of those traditions, or
so
not traditions, but
the next category is Grifter of the Year. So this was put up to the vote, the people. I do want to read my awesome commentary on this because I had the seeds. In the article, I had them seeded. So, Grifter of the Year. As a perk for your support, you get to help recap the year and determine our top grifter. In our snap poll from months ago, number 1 seed James Lindsay secured his top seed, blowing away the competition. Number 2, Pearl Davis is looking for a rematch, and her consistency in grift has been day in and out. Eliza Blue was in the earlier poll, but she has been eliminated due to lack of sustained relevance. So that was the hype going into the poll. The results are in, and Pearl Davis has eked out a victory over James Lindsay. Are you stunned by this upset of the 2 seed over the 1 seed in the championship of Grift?
I mean, at least in my realm, I mean, none of those names came to mind when I was doing it. So
Who did?
I had Rona Romney McDaniel's and Jenna Ellis.
I like the Jenna Ellis thing, but I'm not sure it works as much. I think she kind of had a lot of money going into this year. I don't think she's been a grifter necessarily this year. I think in 2021, that's a different question when you're, misusing a lot, doing very bad legal work for a certain, former president.
But yeah,
But
obviously Pearl being very vapid and just
she's been
reciting
very
other talking
prominent this
points.
year. She's day in and day out. She is putting on the grind of grift. And she's pretty open about she's doing this for money and media popularity. And she'll talk about, what is and what isn't husband and wife material, but she doesn't actually aspire to be wife material herself. So there's that. But Pearl Davis won. So
Fair.
she is the winner. And you can't complain. Game recognized game, right? Biggest bum.
I mean, I had Ted Cruz because of I guess his love of
Uganda.
Uganda, his love of Uganda. Like,
Hatred of Uganda, actually.
hatred, true, but he loves to talk about Uganda. He can't get enough because obviously he condemned him on the law that they passed, and then he condemned him later on about something that happened with Jews and Israelis in Uganda, which I think was featured in the Last King of Scotland, that movie with Forrest Whitaker. I think that's what he was talking about. But it's just like, what is up with Ted Cruz in Uganda? Like his obsession. He doesn't care about the American people. He didn't care about. I don't
He
think he
voted
cared about.
to fund Ukraine, right?
Yeah, I don't think he cared about Ken Paxton. Um,
Now, to be fair, he is connected with Chip Roy, who has beef with Ken Paxton. And that's an inner Texas battle, so I'm not going to really judge Chip Roy for that.
I could also say, well, he's also connected with Greg Abbott too, and
There's probably a lot more beef there, but Ken Paxton has been one of the best,
the best.
the best state attorney general in the country. I think that's pretty
But
clear.
he's a complete non-factor in the Senate, and
Yeah, he's been pretty comatose, but I feel like he also won last year. I had Donald Trump, but that was true for like the first 9 months of the year, perhaps, but not very true the last 3 months of the year.
I mean, I just wouldn't have considered him biggest bum as far as this year goes, just because obviously he is winning in my polls, and obviously he has a lot of legal
But in
work cut
terms
out for
of
him.
like his speaking ability, but it's like, yeah, he's just super old now and it's really showing. The energy isn't there. He had a lot of performance issues. And I think if he did get up on a debate stage, he would not do well at all. But it has he been bumming it this year? Because I think the grift is as strong as it can be. I do think his whatever's going on with him and his lawyer is not just attorney-client privilege. But I don't know. This is a very difficult category. It makes me want to think that maybe we should just go off the wall with some sort of sports reference. Is there like an athlete that's bumming it this year? I this is a harder category for me because I'm not sure Ted Cruz really had expectations going into 2023. So if you got something in the
I mean,
chat,
I thought of the whole Uganda situation as like, wow. I mean, if you wanted to, I mean, you could actually have nominated Chris Roseborough in this category, in that you have no problem going after the charismatics and the prosperity types, but when it comes to someone in your own camp, theologically, it's all of a sudden it's a little bit more of a touchy subject.
yeah, that's certainly a fair argument you can make. I think we're going to circle back to biggest bum. I do want to go on to play a hater of the year. Now, this is inspired by the Dave Chappelle skit, if you're familiar with that. The results have been astonishing to me as well. The Pearl Davis, James Lindsay one was the least astonishing, just to be clear. But this one is pretty astonishing. So, play ahead of the year. Urban Dictionary defines the term as most simply a playa hater is someone who openly criticizes, purposely attempts to sabotage, or who indulges in any number of other activities slash behaviors aimed at someone they consider a playa, or even at playas in general. So that is the word. The derogatory aspect of the term comes from the idea that the person who's hating is really only jealous. They play a hate because they wish they could be as successful, or alternatively, wishes they could somehow have the playa to themselves. That's more of a relationship sense, I guess. But yeah, so we had a few nominees for this. It's all G3 all the time here. Nathaniel Jolly earned his top rank as the number one seed going in to this poll because he won the previous Snap poll. However, the competition is fierce in mid-Eva. Owen Strand's woke revert saw some hating at the G3 conference. Virgil Walker loves talking smack on Christian nationalists. Scott Annual lectures on associations despite his history. Josh Bice blocked me on Twitter. but he has nonetheless been quite unhinged this year. Owen Strand blocked me too, as well.
Owen Strand was my choice.
So you had Owen Strand. What did the people say? Spoiler alert, it was in fact Owen Strand. Let me make sure that let me double check those results. It was Owen Strand. Last I checked, Owen Strand has a decisive majority. Owen Strand is the winner. I would have gone with Nathaniel Jolly, to be clear. But it is Owen Strand that is the player hater of the year. So he was not even in the last poll, I don't think.
No, to me, the whole speech at the G3 conference was what would set him over the edge over Jolly or some of the others.
Maybe my sales pitch for him was just so good, and I used his picture on the article because I don't have a picture of Nathaniel Jolly, to be clear. The last picture I had involved his church in Alaska, which is no longer a thing. So that's that. Best actor.
I actually did put Vivek Ramaswamy down for this because obviously he came out of nowhere. And honestly, he's very convincing in certain respects because obviously
very believable.
It's like, he's an actor, but he plays the character so well. But he's an actor. And the things he says, it's like, whoa. It's kind of like, it's almost like the guy falling in love with the sex worker. You're probably, it's not real, but at the same time, he's saying all the things you want to hear from the person you do want to marry. And that's what Vivek does. He crosses those third rails. He says the things that other candidates are too afraid to say.
I mean, it's not to the benefit of his campaign, but
no, but obviously he speaks to a lot of the dissident right. A lot of those voters that he is appealing to are pretty much Trump supporters anyway. But
right, but he's basically their voice on a stage because Trump won't do events. On that line, Sean Patrick Flannery gave a very good performance in Nefarious. Any other acting performances that really stand out? You've seen more movies than I have this year, right?
Yes, I mean, I have one that's gonna come later on. So,
what, worst actor?
No, well, I have that too, but
I mean, I think you're right. Vivek wins. I think you are. I think you made a compelling case on Vivek. So in that case, let's move on to worst actor. I had LeBron James because he did a very bad flop early on in the year. And like no one touched him, but he's trying to act like he was tripped or pushed or something like that. And the replay clearly shows that he wasn't touched. So he didn't sell the foul hard enough and just not good acting there.
I had Rachel Zegler, the actress in the Brown Snow, that's going to be coming out later this year.
Next year.
Well, next year. And obviously she literally tanked an entire movie.
It might have been delayed to 2025, right?
Yeah, she tanked an entire movie by running her mouth.
Well, they also had Not Real Dwarves.
That too.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, and there's no dwarves.
Oh, do we prefer Brown Snow or Snow Brown?
But she didn't give. We don't know what that performance is, so you'd have to judge her based on the Hunger Games movie that she did, and what other movie was she in?
I don't even know.
But another nomination that maybe should be floated is Awkwafina. Like, is she not insufferable? Is she not the worst?
I mean, yes, but it's not like she's single-handed. Well, I mean, she is single-handedly dragging down like bad movies, but I don't know. Rachel Zegler made a lot of viral clips and completely tanked and derailed an ongoing movie that was going to lose Disney like $100 million or something ridiculous. And again, she is literally part of the effort to replace, more or less white culture.
All right, I think you've made the compelling case. LeBron James, no one watches
regular season
basketball, but Rachel Zegler, is going to be the reason no one's going to watch Snow White. So I think that's a
And
pretty
again, it's
reasonable
another
case.
portrayal. It's another portrayal of Snow White where the evil queen is like more attractive than the Snow White
Yes,
character.
yeah, that's pretty odd because what's her face is supposed to be threatened by the beauty of Snow White, and
I
that's
mean, it's like Gal
clearly
Gadot.
not the case here.
Gal Gadot, come on. I mean, again, it was the same way with Charlize Theron over Kristen Stewart.
I mean,
Like, come
now
on
Gal
now.
Gadot can't act worth anything, but she's there for appeal. But Rachel Zegler I don't know if she's a good actress or not, to be honest, but she's winning worst actress, so maybe not. But she did not, know her role so as to shut her hole. She didn't do that. So that's called being bad at your job because half of your job is to promote your movie. So I think you made the case there. So now we go into our celebrity, athlete, musician, entrepreneur categories. We don't necessarily fill up all these categories, but you got any in mind that
I
deserve
mean,
laud?
obviously, I think this combined celebrity and entrepreneur would be Elon Musk. I think he was a huge contributor to headlines throughout 2023 in his war with various factions in the elitist spheres that a lot of people just don't understand like how elites operate. So he's going to war with a lot of these elite factions. Obviously, he's a very much a technocrat that doesn't change, but he's a guy. He's kind of like a very Caesarian figure, almost like Trump, except he's again a technocratic Caesar.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty fair.
the amount of headlines that he and news cycles that he dominated with a lot of his antics and his war with the ADL, that he kind of, 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, has kind of been his whole policy. So he's basically just World War I, fighting
I
over the
have
same
I
five
have
miles
him
of
for a
strip.
different category for sure, but yeah, as far as like celebrity and entrepreneur of the year, he definitely gets that. Um and I would definitely have him for entrepreneur. I don't really think there's a more compelling celebrity. You got anything for athlete?
I mean, no, but we could do like the Texas Rangers because they won a World Series.
Tyreek
And
Hill is probably the best case for MVP in the NFL. My opinion, it's definitely not Brock Purdy with what he did the other night, and it's Lamar Jackson didn't really play all that well either. I mean, he played the perfect game that he was given, but you're also given the ball in like the,
yeah, four. I
inside
mean,
field goal range to to start because of 5 interceptions total, but 4 that were meaningful um in the game. So, if we want but you're right, Texas Rangers should get it cuz they didn't do a pride night.
they also didn't do a Pride Night, which is
Athletes of the year material there. Texas Rangers. Musician.
yeah. This one I just didn't have.
Do we want to give it to the guy, Oliver Anthony?
No, the 15 minutes of fame. No,
Ouch. Um, it's going to be a little bit longer than that, but I do think you're right. I did not go on to listen to any more of his music after the one song. I think a lot of his facade is fake, and that kind of worries me, to be honest. And I just want to just steer clear of that, to be honest. So we can skip this category
I
entirely.
could look up an obscure metal reference and try to nominate that and justify it, but probably not the John or I'm not sure an Eva Award is.
It's not an Eva
It
category.
doesn't cross
And
pollinate well.
so, best politician.
I originally had Matt Gaetz, but I did choose Thomas Massey instead, and that's the late consideration of him taking on the AI PAC establishment and actually being the only politician in Washington that puts America above other nations.
What are your thoughts on Greg Abbott?
He's bad.
Okay. You don't think he's had a good year?
Well, I mean, I don't know if he stands up. I don't know if he knows how to stand up for his own people, which is both the double entendre that he's in a wheelchair, and is,
Wow.
but no, he's not doing anything. I mean, you should have declared a national. You should have declared an emergency. You should be arresting the people. You should be turning them back. You should be even shooting at them if they try to cross. Again, let the state, let the federal government do what they try to do, but just violate. If they go to court, violate the courts. Who cares? But if you're not willing to,
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't take down my wall
and
in
again,
the Rio Grande River.
He's in his third term, so I don't want to hear he had a good year he had a good year. He should have been doing that for 12 years, or I guess 9 years.
Well, it is interesting. He is challenging the Supreme Court case, though, with his law. He's challenging the Arizona's, show me your papers law, essentially.
Yeah.
So you do love to see that. I thought that was a very good immigration law that was passed by the House and he signed. So maybe he shouldn't get all the credit for that. But Texas is stepping up its game on the illegal immigration issue. It took him a while, but that's one thing about Greg Abbott is he can react to pressure.
Well,
A lot of people who are rhinos wouldn't do that. Would Nikki Haley as governor of Texas do that? The answer is clearly no. She'd be lecturing you on.
But this is the same Greg Abbott that signed a lot of the other legislation. So I mean, Greg Abbott's always kind of been a follower and a laggard when it comes to like hitting the top issues. I mean, even on a lot of the gender stuff, he's still laggard.
And to be clear, the parentheses under the best politician is it's meant to reward a statesman. We want to actually reward good politicians here, not just make snooty remarks about this guy's a really good politician. In a derogatory sense. So I think Thomas Massie has earned it.
Again, 500 representatives in the House, and he's the only one that actually puts America first.
You love to see that. And he took a lot of heat from that. So we got worst politician. This one's actually pretty tough.
I thought this was obvious.
Okay, go.
Kevin McCarthy.
Why did I think his name was Mike when I wrote it down?
You combine Mike Johnson with
Mike McCarthy might be someone else. Yeah, explain why.
So this is the guy that he had a tough battle to get into the speakership. Then of course he lost the speakership despite thinking he had the support of the Democrats to prevail, which is funny considering like I'm watching House of Cards and they actually relay this entire scenario, except it's from the Democrats' perspective, that you would use the Republicans to vote out the Democrat speaker. And it's just like, no, you would. So they so a lot of almost predictive programming. But yeah, I mean, he got played by the Democrats. And then, of course, he's now quitting Congress. He's not leaving at the end of his term. I think he's actually resigning.
Yes, he's resigning, and now the GOP only holds a 2-seat majority.
So he is the worst. And, I think getting him out of Congress is a victory.
Even if it's just along those lines, George Santos.
Yeah, I mean, there's a strong case for George
gay
Santos.
Saul Goodman.
Yeah, the gay Saul Goodman.
Okay, so I also had Nancy Mace written down. Governor Bill Lee. You called a special session to pass gun control in Tennessee.
We can circle back to biggest bum right now on Bill Lee.
Yeah, let's do it. Bill Lee, biggest bum of the year. There we go. I knew we'd come up with it. Bill Lee.
Tennessee should be a red state. It's like got a 30-point Trump majority, right? Or something ridiculous. And you even got Daily Wire in your backyard to make your job super easy.
And to actually heighten your national profile. But you ain't going to be a vice president now. So that ain't happening. There we go. He gets biggest bum. And I agree, Kevin McCarthy, not Mike McCarthy. I know his name's Kevin, but I wrote down Mike on my notes here for some reason because I was doing it last night. I also had Nancy Mace and Mike Pence.
I mean, Mike Pence was just Mike Pence. I don't know if there was any
Mike Pence is pretty bad, though.
I mean, there was no expectation. He was pretty much a dead-on arrival going into the
and he still did bad. Like, how many applause lines? He tried to tell a sex joke, and it still didn't work.
Yeah, I am I like to say I've been sleeping with a teacher for 30 years. That was the best.
Is the cringiest. But yeah, that was Mike Pence for you. Yeah, so Kevin McCarthy wins worst
And
politician.
again, I
I
mean,
think
let's
it's
just
completely
be real
fitting.
with George Santos was going down next year anyway. And again, unless there's some major improvement in the candidates, I mean, the
Like,
GOP.
how bad does your scandal have to be to get kicked out of Congress, though?
Which, I mean, circling back to Thomas Massey, he didn't vote to overturn the election in New York like, a lot of the Republicans did. Because, again, they don't want to have a majority because easier to be the minority.
Much easier. And
And
now
again,
you've
George
got
Santos
two.
actually had a decent record despite being a homosexual, a drag queen, and a liar, and Jewish. I mean, despite all his scandals, he was at least a useful soldier, just a clown.
He
A,
was.
a,
I didn't think his voting record was all that good,
I think
but
it was good because he had all the pressure he had all the pressure on him, so he voted the right way. But yeah, he was going to be a one-term congressman
that would make him more popular.
that
Okay.
only got bumped up because of Lee Zeldin.
Uh, Activist of the year. I think
Wow,
this one was pretty obvious.
who did you have?
Dusty Devers. You went from activist and now you the state senator in Oklahoma. And you're going to bring the legislation you've been talking about to the floor of the Oklahoma Senate. Like, that's activist of the year material there. And he's like the state senator that's carrying the banner of Christian nationalism. So you love to see that. Is there anyone that's going to top Dusty Devers on this?
I mean, I had the Anti-Defamation League for their ability to control media and big corporations and the fact that they're waging a war with Elon Musk.
But that's not good. This
Yeah,
is a
they're not. It's
benevolent.
not a good activist. It's just a why can't we do that activist?
All right. So
But
Dusty
I'll
Devers.
agree with Dusty to send a more
Yeah,
positive
this
message.
was a positive award. This is not a negative award. This is the negative award, larper of the year. So you think people think you're an activist, but you're really not. This one I had previous award winner. Who do you have for LARP?
Conservative Baptist Network.
I had
For their,
James Lindsay, which is complete with big long Chinese sword.
I mean, I
Or
would
is it
argue
Japanese anime?
the
I don't know.
CBN, given their abysmal performance in the
No,
SBC
they've
convention
been
this past
irrelevant
year.
all year. They've been irrelevant all year. I called them a LARP last year. I mean, I don't think that them being a LARP is new, but James Lindsay, I think, yeah, the dude's a LARPer. Don't do anything. There's going to be a transgender George Floyd in the month of June. Watch out. You've got to tone down your rhetoric because this is going to happen. It doesn't happen.
Oh, because the whole if we try to do something, then that means things are going to be a lot worse. Which how does it get worse than the fact that California is going to be taking children away from their parents, or the fact that was it
Someone had to sue in order to adopt a child. I believe
yeah
it was in California because they didn't want Christians adopting children.
yeah I mean
Yeah,
I
it's
get
pretty bad. So I think James Lindsay clearly wins because it's like don't do anything, and he does the cosplay with the sword. Definition of LARP. Hack of the year. Now this one I thought of very late in the game. So I had Tim Pool and Jenna Ellis. So here's my reasoning behind Tim Pool. His fake indignation against Ron DeSantis and his campaign, like, I can't stomach their actions. They're so dirty and liars. And then you're a Trump hack. And like Laura Loomer, anyone who, said that Casey DeSantis faked cancer and that Ron tried to kill his sister or something like that. All these lies that come out of like, Laura Loomer and the Brandon Dilley crowd. Now that guy's also a LARPer. Brendan Dilley ran for Congress once.
now to
Most people
strengthen
don't
the
know that. So Trump's meme lord ran for Congress once, Guess how he did?
Poor, didn't even win the primary.
He came in 11th place in a primary
Crowded field.
out of 12. So yeah, that's this guy's appeal. And he ran on QAnon and stuff. This was like
Now, to
2018.
bolster the case for Tim Pool,
Oh, you got
um,
more.
well, there is a theory out there that I heard that he's getting money under the table through his super chats because he'll have these massive super chat in like dollar
I
amounts,
totally believe that because
and that's just bribery, or
Tucker
that's
Carlson is bought out. He did a 7 figures deal with Public Square or Public SQ, which is in a company that Donald Trump Jr. invested in. The Post Millennial was bought by a company that, again, Donald Trump Jr. is also invested in, I think, or a Trump mega donor. I'm not sure which one on that one, but they were bought out by, again, Trump's people. So Trump is buying up, Team Trump is buying up conservative media. And even though Tim Pool isn't remotely conservative, he is that reasonable centrist, and you're using that to attack DeSantis is an interesting tactic, but you're basically saying it's the super chat army
yeah. I mean,
that
it's basically how Walter White laundered his money, except it's
in
via
the
super chats.
in the crowdfunding
Now, I can't
money
say I
laundering
verified this,
that
but I did hear it on another stream from another streamer that, if you look at it, the dollar amounts in his streams, it's like, yeah, $500 super chat with no words. It's like a pay. That's, looks like a payoff. It smells like a payoff. How else
certainly
would you?
feels nice.
How do you launder a bribe or money? I mean, you just use a super chat.
So you like the Tim Pool nomination?
I mean, I actually had Jeremy Boring for the contractual capitulation to big tech. This would be with the Steven Crowder drama, also with his
Yeah,
chocolate.
but he's kind of been, I don't want to say he's kind of been vindicated in that, but Steven Crowder is
From a
definitely.
business position, yes. I mean, I think Glenn Beck is more vindicated by not re-signing Crowder, but
Yeah, Glenn Beck just completely, or not Glenn Beck, because he doesn't actually run the Blaze.
well,
But Gaston
Gaston.
Mooney, I think, the Blaze dodged a major bullet by not re-signing, uh, Steven Crowder and not wanting to re-up that contract, which was probably going to be super expensive. He was going to get like, he probably wanted like Shonai Atani numbers, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, Blaze wisely said, no, you're overpaid and you're a declining
But
product.
with Jeremy Boring, I mean, he obviously the chocolate grift as well of selling private label chocolate to
Oh, this is
get
the
back
wrong
at
category for
Hershey.
that.
And then, of course, you have him bashing Ben Zeisloff for writing an article about
I
at
mean, I
your.
think Tim Pool wins over Jeremy Boring.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I even helped you with your argument on Tim Pool, but
What about Jenna Ellis?
I mean, I had her for like grifter or hack. I mean, just because he essentially defrauded people for $200,000 for a case that you capitulated on. So, I mean, the argument is kind of there. It's just whether it's the biggest.
Yeah, okay. Tim Pool wins. All right. Rookie of the year.
This one I had Ben Zeisloff just
I don't
because
think
he,
he's really a rookie.
I mean, him
Why I
on
didn't
his
have
own,
him.
being his own
He's not
name.
necessarily on his own, though. He was hired by an existing company. Now, this company didn't really have the web traffic that would denote paying a massive, former Daily Wire staffer and recruiting him. So they probably have some venture capital investment, which is not a bad thing. Or maybe angel investment might be a better way to put it. But they brought him in to build that company up.
But yeah,
And he's doing it.
but
He's
he as an
delivering the
individual has
results.
a brand, and also you could say the Sentinel has a brand as well, and that would be a major development
So
in the last year.
so I had CJ Stroud. I went sports here. Rookie of the year. He's clearly, because it's hard to define whether people are rookies of the year. So I also had Ryan Turnipseed and Oliver Anthony.
I originally
Again,
would have
I've
had
been
that, but
writing these down, as the year goes on. So I think CJ Stroud is definitely the rookie of the year. I don't. So that's just my opinion. He's definitely the most definable rookie. Uh, out of compared to Ben Zeisloff. We also have Keith Woods. Remind me who
Res-
that. Whoa, we can get X Chat. Wow, wow. I didn't know we could get chat from X or
I
Twitter.
like Keith Woods. I mean, I've listened to him on Elijah Schaefer's
Oh,
channel once or
that's who that is.
twice.
Okay, okay. This is
I
ringing a
don't have
bell.
the compelling case. I'll like, and I'm not sure how new to the scene he is.
Yeah, that's the hard part, which is why I think sports is the safest way to not insult people. So I'm gonna go with CJ Stroud. Uh, Comeback of the year. I think this one's pretty obvious,
Who do you
but
have?
who do you have?
I had
Who'd you
two.
miss?
I had two things down. I had Anabaptism for the comeback because of the anti-Christian nationalist crowd is just rehashing Anabaptist arguments from the 1500s. And then I also put Alex Jones because he did have a kind of a resurgence, a little renaissance of Alex Jones that he's now acceptable to talk about in even more mainstream channels. Obviously, he got restored to Twitter via a Elon Musk poll. So I do think,
So we can't underestimate that because Elon Musk swore that he would not reinstate Alex Jones, but how the turntables.
yeah, the tables
I
be
don't think
turning.
he's really made necessarily much of a good comeback because he did lose some lawsuits this year, um, which sucks for him. But honestly, there's no reason for him to pay any of that. I wouldn't give those people a dime. Uh, Keith Wood says Putin.
I don't
Here's
think
the
it was a
thing.
comeback.
I mean, he might not be in great health, but the dude had a mercenary strike and, dealt with that. Like, whoa. And props to the president of Belarus for helping him out with that and negotiating a peace. But as far as the war in Ukraine goes, I wouldn't say that Russia's coming back. I just think it's been an attrition the entire time. And now Ukraine has a bunch of 40-year-olds on the front lines.
I mean,
So,
Putin already did make Russia come back from the dead of Boris Yeltsin. So, I mean, so we're a little late to be calling the comeback of Vladimir Putin.
or Russia in general. Uh, so the obvious answer is Mark Driscoll. The dude had like last year was all about the rise and fall of Mars Hill, rise and fall of Mars Hill. This year it's like Mark Driscoll has pretty much reestablished himself as a pretty influential voice in evangelicalism. I just don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, for better and
His
worse.
better or worse, I don't think Mark Driscoll is a false teacher personally. I do think he has some issues with his theology, and I think a lot of those issues are in reaction to cessationism, and that's why his arguments are very bad in that debate. So, just my thought on that. But so I think he's a clown on that issue. I think he's a clown on that debate, but that's also a tertiary issue in my mind. Whether someone's a cessationist or a continuationist is tertiary. He's not exactly doing the whole we're doing speaking in tongues and worship services nonsense, but he is sort of partnering with people who do. I don't like some of the stuff that he's done, but he's also come back in a way for good messaging. Uh, his Elijah sermon series was not bad at all. I thought there's only a couple issues, and that's over the course of like 7 sermons. So he's definitely made a comeback in prominence that's undeniable, and I think he has the comeback of the year, and I hope it's for good and not evil. False teachers get worse over time, not better. So we'll see. Uh,
Yeah, that's a
my
fair point.
runner, my runner-up was James Merritt, who was basically disgraced in the Southern Baptist Convention for caping up for his gay son. And he was the guy who read the motion on the floor of the Southern Baptist Convention with the 5 presidents. They had him do the reading. So that must be a comeback. He's back now. but let's be real, it's not the same size or scope.
Yeah, I mean,
So
it might
Mark
not even be.
Driscoll clearly wins that. I didn't think you were going to come up with a better one than that, by the way. So now we got some categories to fill up. Best movie.
I had Guy Ritchie's The Covenant as far as a good action movie. Obviously, I mean it's certainly not as vulgar as anything Guy Ritchie's notoriously known for, but it is a good action movie starring Jake Gyllenhaal. And again, if you want something that also has a very conservative message to it, because it is about the pullout, it is a rebuke of the pullout of Afghanistan that happened under Joe Biden's watch. So it does have a little bit of a conservative bent to it, while being an excellent movie, well acted, and
The
telling that
Gospel Coalition got crap for singing this movie's praises, by the way.
which I think were too harsh on.
But when you're going after Doug Wilson for language, you open yourself up for that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I have no problem saying that this is a good movie, that people should watch it. And again, I'm not going to say, oh, it's
I
got
have
a
yet to see
gospel
this movie,
mess.
by the
It's
way.
got a gospel message hidden underneath the certain. I'm not going to, go out of my way to argue that. But
We're art critics now. But yeah. So Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. I'm going to defer to you because I don't think I've seen a better
and I'm a
movie than
Guy
that
Ritchie
this year.
fan as a director. I think he's one of the better
Like
directors.
seriously, this has been a movie. This has been a year where there's a lot of good mid-level movies, a lot of really bad blockbuster movies, but no like your traditional good Oscar bait movie that hasn't really happened this year. Now maybe Ferrari is that. Haven't seen that yet. Haven't even seen any reviews about it, but maybe Ferrari is that movie. But this has been a year of some really bad movies, which we'll talk about in a second. Any best TV show?
I mean, I went with Succession. I'm just basing that sight unseen. I mean, I'll take the word of certain critics I follow that I do trust, that this is a good show. And obviously it's a little bit of a satire. It's almost like HBO's response to Billions, except it's better than Billions. And
Because Billions had to go super woke,
yeah, they
right?
went woke in season
Now
3.
I hear Succession has a bad season in it, but
I haven't heard of that, but
I heard the last season's not that, and we
uh,
are rewarding current performance is what's being rewarded here.
yeah, I mean, I'm going a little bit sight unseen because it's the only thing that came out this year that I actually do want to see, that actually was made this year.
So Black Mirror came out with its 6th season, which had some really good content in it, but it also had some questionable content in it. I don't think what it did was worthy, so we're going to give Succession the award. Go ahead. Book. Any best book nominees?
Yeah, this one I didn't have because I haven't. I
I'm going
haven't.
to go
I
with
mean,
Andrew Isker's book,
the only book
Prodigal's Option.
that I've read from this year, I'm currently reading, and you'll get a review on that sometime, probably in the next 2 weeks.
All right. What book is that?
That is the Mark Dice book, The War on
Okay.
Conservatives.
That'll be interesting because he's kind of an interesting guy. Do we have a best video game? I do not.
Yeah, I
I
don't have
do
one.
not believe Crusader Kings 3 came out in 2023. Now, I will double check that. It did come out on Xbox in 2023. But let me double check that before we give this an award. So moving on to worst. Worst movie. That's a tough topic. There's
This
been a
one,
lot of really bad movies this year. I almost put it up for a poll, but I feel like this needed a lot of discussion.
I actually did Blue Beetle because I think it encapsulates everything that's wrong with all the other movies that might be worst movie of the year, except it has zero redeeming qualities as a movie. The acting is also poor across the board. So it's not even like there's a good performance in the mix that
Okay.
maybe shines a little bit brighter in a
The
dark spot. It's just 100% bad.
fact check is in. Crusader Kings 3 came out on, I guess, in its original platform in 2020, but it did become available on Xbox in 2023. So that's where I play it because I'm not a PC gamer. So you're saying Blue Beetle, that was on my list of worst. Let me tell you how much I hated that movie. A lot. Like imagine Ant-Man, but even worse. Ant-Man is a bad movie. It is a bad Marvel movie.
Yeah, bad,
You,
horrible
you
CGI.
just took Iron Man and took out all the good parts of Iron Man, and you're left with that. Now do that same thing to Blue Beetle or to Ant-Man, and you got Blue Beetle. It's the woke, insufferable version of Ant-Man, which is already not a good movie. Uh, I actually think Ant-Man and the Wasp is better than Ant-Man because I hated the villain in Ant-Man. It's a it's a stupid villain, and they did the same stupid villain uh in Blue Beetle, except tragic backstory and stuff like that. I hate. I don't like origin stories for superheroes in movies a whole lot. Like, I don't like them a whole lot. They're generally not their best movie. Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire is an exception.
No, so Spider-Man 2 is still better than
Batman,
Spider-Man.
that's what a lot of people say. Um, but it's still really good. Batman Begins is pretty good, but clearly better surpassed by The Dark Knight. Undeniable. So a lot of times sequels in superheroes movies tend to be better because origin stories just aren't that, I don't really like origin stories in general. The villains aren't always good. Now, Iron Man was able to do this because it had Robert Downey Jr. If you had another actor in there, it would have been terrible because the villain also sucked in Iron Man. And then they use that same template for all the other Marvel origin movies like Ant-Man and now Blue Beetle. So when DC tries to make a Marvel movie, it just always ends up bad. Make your own movies, use your own storylines, and you do much better.
And Quantumanium was bad, but obviously
Quantumanium, yes, let's talk about Ant-Man
you could at
3.
least say, hey, Michael Douglas is a good actor. You could at least
Michelle
say
Pfeiffer
that.
is a good actor.
Yeah,
Or
you could compliment her performance, even though they kind of cuck Douglas in the film. But you could at least say there's some good acting in the movie, even if even though the actors know
it
that they're.
wasn't done by Paul Rudd, though.
I
Paul
mean,
Rudd just isn't funny as Ant-Man. That's a real shock to me, actually. Like when I watched Ant-Man 1, he wasn't funny. He was actually funnier in Ant-Man 2. And then in Ant-Man 3, he's back to not being funny again. So Ant-Man 3 is definitely on the list. Indiana Jones 5 is also the movie that needs to be talked about for this. I think Indiana Jones is one of the most overrated franchises in general. You have one good movie, and that's Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. That is a good movie. It is not a great movie. Indiana Jones 2, was it Temple of Doom, is bad. I'm not going to pretend like that's a good movie at all. Um, and then Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is okay. I wouldn't really call it a good movie. It's certainly not a great movie. And the intro to that movie sucks. It's too long. The prologue is too long. It's morally pretentious. Give me Fast and Furious. That is a much better franchise than Indiana Jones. That is my hot take. Indiana Jones and Fast and Furious are the same franchise, just in a different decade, different theme. One is archaeology, the other is cars and mechanics. They both have heist. They both have criminal actors as main characters because Indiana Jones is a thief, by the way. He's just stealing from people that we have, that the audience is told are bad. But he is a thief. Nonetheless, he has no problem stealing people's cars and, chasing people down with them in ultimate moves that have no impact on what happens in the plot. Like you take Indiana Jones out of the first movie and the same thing happens. The Nazis get the ark and they all die. Same thing happens. But Crystal Skull is yet another, or not Crystal Skull. Dial of Destiny is yet another Indiana Jones movie. I've not actually seen Crystal Skull. I've heard very bad things about it. Dial of Destiny is an Indiana Jones movie where he's the only thing that allows the bad guys to accomplish their mission. And when they accomplish their mission, it has no impact on anything. So you take him out, nothing happens. Because again, the story has no stakes in it at all. At the end of the day, that's a
I mean,
spoiler alert, by the
it
way.
was ridiculous, and they got
It
again.
also
It's
violated its own time travel rules because this is a movie that clearly has what happened view of the past. Like, you can't actually change the past. If you went back in time, you were always back in time. It's basically Star Trek if you warped around the sun at warp 10. That was the time travel rules for Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny. But the movie tried to tell you that it was butterfly effect, that if Indiana Jones wanted to stay in the past, he would have changed the outcome of the past. And no, you already told us that that's not how, you already showed us that that's not how the rules work, because Indiana Jones's watch, or the Nazis' watch, was on Archimedes' body or whatever. I'm totally not caring that I'm spoiling this really bad movie. But it doesn't even understand its own time
I
travel
mean, it's a
rules.
ridiculous movie, but it is kind of like, okay, this is the normal ridiculous because this is the exact same thing they do with the Star Wars franchise. So it's bad, but we've already seen it bad. Like it's almost like
We've
it's
already
on
seen
original.
it bad with Blue Beetle, though.
Yeah, but that had no redeeming qualities in it. It would be my
George
opinion.
Lopez?
No,
What was the redeeming quality in Indiana Jones 5?
I'm trying to think. It might have been shorter.
It was 2.5 hours,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah, it was pretty long too.
It felt long. Blue Beetle was not as long. Blue Beetle was under 2 hours, right? Right?
Probably because the studio probably capped it. Um, yeah, I mean, if you want to give it to Dial Destiny, that's fine.
Yeah, let me look up the length.
And
122 minutes, really? No. Dial Destiny's clearly worse than that because I had to suffer through that longer. Clearly. So Dial of Destiny will take the cake. And I fell asleep watching Ant-Man 3. But I woke up and didn't miss anything. So that movie sucked. Do we have a worse TV show?
I put Witcher 3. It might not even be the worst TV show that came out this year, but obviously, it's like, it's Henry Cavill's last time putting on the Witcher costume, and they absolutely did everything they could to just make it look like crap. And I mean, you have mages that are fat and ugly. They race swap every character they possibly can. Like, mages are supposed to be good looking, and they're fat. You have fat mages. And the fact that most of what they were doing is not really in the book, or when they are doing it in the book, then they're completely taking it out of context. And obviously, a lot of people are upset with the way they did the horse episode. I mean, the idea of being in a desert, like being in a survivalist situation, has made for some of the best episodes in television history. When you're looking at
Pine Barrens
Pine
and
Barrens on
Sopranos.
Sopranos, you have
All right,
Breaking
I
Breaking
got to share
Bad did
my.
their version.
Okay, yeah, he killed 16 Czechoslovakians. The guy's an interior decorator. Love that quote.
Yes, that is the best. Like, and again, that episode was Pine Barrens is directed by Steve Buscemi. Fun fact, but I mean, it
Oh,
was. I don't.
we have a nomination for Amazon's Lord of the Rings
Did
prequel
that come
series.
out this
That
year?
won last year. We
Yeah, I
gave
think
that. We
last
gave. Yeah, that won last year.
because
So the rules
but
are 2023.
they are making a second season of that. So don't
This isn't
worry.
the Grammys, which they fudge album of the year and stuff like that. They
But I
also give
mean,
like best new artist to someone who's like on their third album or something.
and for even something that they did that was book accurate, which was like Siri going through the desert. I mean, obviously, if it's on Breaking Bad or if it's in The Sopranos, it looks better because it's actually in a real life setting. Like with Sopranos, Pine Barrens, they didn't actually plan to have snow when they filmed it, and the fact that they had snow made it like wow. And obviously, in Breaking Bad, you can go to the desert in New Mexico quite easily. So the fact that they're just doing it in green screen of what's supposed to be like the Sahara Desert, it just, I mean, at least they had a real horse.
So there's also Velma, which was universally hated, and there's The Chosen, which had season 3 come out this year. So do we want to reconsider?
I don't think The Chosen could be more insufferable than.
Have you tried watching grown men talk about feelings for 50 minutes? Have you had to suffer through that in The
I
Witcher?
had to suffer. I mean, maybe. They turned Yaskier into Yasqueer, okay? I had to suffer that. I had to suffer men talking about their feelings in a homosexual context because they turned the character gay
Wow, that's pretty bad.
with a character that's actually
Now, to be
a
fair,
child
I'm
in the
only in
book.
season 2 of The Chosen. I've not gotten to season 3, which is this year, but
Like
it's a
the character's supposed to be a child in the book, so that's like, and they
I'm not
turned.
here for watching grown men talk about feelings for 50 minutes. So we'll give The Witcher 3 because you've seen it. And do we have a worst book? I don't think we do. And do we have a worst video game? I also don't think we
I
do.
put Hogwarts Legacy down because the gameplay in that was exceedingly poor to the fact that people were raving about being able to play a Hogwarts game on a PC, and the gameplay looked like crap. The fact that you can just spam dark magic spells. Yeah, I mean the morality of having.
Septum Sempra or whatever that spell was. You
I
can
think
just do that.
that one, but the morality of just having people use all the forbidden curses.
And then you can transfigure yourself into transgenderism, I guess. Like that was also a thing in the game.
I don't recall that part, but yeah, just the gameplay itself looked exceedingly bad. I don't even think it had that much playtime to beat the game. And again, the combat style was very easy. I mean, like the South Park video game.
Wait, so you're saying the Gollum game should win worst game, Charles? We're open for nominations on the floor. After all, we serve the people. Even when the people are wrong, like saying
I don't think Elden Ring was best from this year though. But
I mean, play hit of the year maybe should have gone to Nathaniel Jolly. I'm just kind of saying, but y'all said Owen Strand. So Gollum game.
I have heard bad things about the Gollum game.
All right, let's give it the award. I trust Charles. Meme of the year.
Yeah, I don't have anything for this one, but I mean, there's the whole.
This is a hard year because we had the Megan Hall meme. Do you remember that?
I feel like we need a meme review for the year to.
Megan Hall was the police officer in Tennessee.
Oh, it was yeah.
We had the submarine incident.
Yeah, submarine.
That the submarine imploded. I'm trying to think of memes throughout the year, but we had a lot of Christian nationalist memes that were dank. A lot of Sopranos memes. Like Sopranos memes made a huge rise this year. I'm gonna obviously take a little bit of credit for that, but there's a lot of Sopranos memes this year. The "Why are you gay" meme is definitely. I don't think that originated this year. It's really hard to give it one meme a year. This year of, I don't know how many good memes there were because there was a lot, but was there one to rule them all? Was there a template or anything that ruled them all? And I'm not really sure. Are we really? Because I don't want to be grifty and say, "Oh, the Trump mugshot meme," because that really didn't last. Well, I mean, post a Trump mugshot meme now, you're kind of looking a little lame.
There is the which way, like Christian nationalism gooder than transing kids meme. Like I think that might encapsulate a lot of the.
You're right.
Of 2023.
Christian nationalism gooder than transing kids. I like that. The black female pilots meme. The crashed plane, right?
They crashed a plane into the water because they, the diversity hires, which, shout out to John Harris and his live stream with Stephen Wolf. They actually alluded to the competency crisis.
Was that the most recent one?
No, it was the hour 50-minute one.
Yeah, that was the recent one.
Oh,
for him.
But yeah, they actually alluded to the competency crisis, and that was a good image of what competency crisis is, and that's also embodied in the pilot, the F-35 pilot or whatever that ejected over the ocean, and the plane kept going, and they lost, and the U.S. military lost the plane.
Wow, is John McCain a pilot again?
So yeah, competency crisis is real.
All right, I'm still gonna go with the Christian nationalism gooder than transing kids. The black female pilots was an excellent meme, but it didn't like as far as like the lasting power of that meme goes. I don't know if it tops that. I'm really glad that we get some chat from Twitter now. Like that's a new feature. It wasn't like that. NPC of the year.
I had Michael Brown.
That stands for non-player character. No, that's wrong. That's a wrong answer. Uh, the correct answer is Travis Kelce.
Fair enough. You
You're
got me.
dating Taylor Swift. You're now the poster child for Bud Light, and now you're the poster child for Pfizer. You are an NPC. So it's clearly Travis Kelce. I really thought you had someone better for this. Or I thought we were on the same page. Like, it's obviously Travis Kelce. Like, triple whammy here.
I was light on the sports, so that's why.
I
Well,
was heavier on sports, but
and
triple whammy. Taylor Swift, Pfizer, Bud Light.
I mean, I just did Michael Brown because it's like you could predict what he's going to say on any given issue, almost
Maybe.
like an NPC.
This is not his NPC right now. And he's also getting, Travis Kelce's also getting kind of fat, apparently. His game is worsened as a result of either the Pfizer or the Taylor Swift or the Bud Light. And the Chiefs are kind of cursed right now. You love to see that, though. You won a Super Bowl off a bad call, and here we are. They're starting to get equal treatment, and you love to see that. Let's see, Mangina of the Year for that guy who's so effeminate. This is a very tough category for
So
me.
I had two.
I have two nominees as well.
So
Share
the first
yours.
one is Anthony Bass, who's the Toronto Blue Jays pitcher who caved on the gay issue, and then he got cut not too long after.
What's his name?
Anthony Bass, like the fish.
Okay.
And then the other would be Blake Glosson, who wrote the gay Taylor Swift article at the Gospel Coalition.
That is a very good nomination, but I'm going to overrule the Blake Glosson because of something that's coming up. Because I have a surprise award that you don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
I have Mike Keabone and Brent Leatherwood. Mike Keabone's the crybaby on the stage of the Southern Baptist Convention.
Yep.
Brent Leatherwood might have also cried at the Southern Baptist Convention, but has been leading the charge to suppress the Tranifesto, and he's shed some tears in that as well.
So crocodile tears for the Tranifesto
I'm not sure they're fake, but
but does that win over a pitcher?
Yes.
Really? What about not Glosson though?
To this audience, no, Glosson's got a separate award coming.
Glosson's got a separate award.
Yes. So, yeah, I'm gonna go with Brent Leatherwood. The dude has nothing tonight, but he's got to get this right. Okay, so Backup 2023 says Travis Kelce has a song with his name on it coming his way. Here's the reason why that's not true, though, is Taylor Swift isn't really singing about that anymore. That used to be true. That used to be a perk of dating Taylor Swift. You get a song. That's not really true anymore, at least. That used to be true. But her music's even worse now than it was when it was about that. My opinion. And I don't think that's a reason to date Taylor Swift. Whew. You just now, what is it? Tyreek Hill allegedly has had 3 babies this year with 3 different women, and then married someone else. So a good year for him, I guess. He was, athlete of the year potential for that reason, but not for that reason. But then Travis Kelce is dating Taylor Swift. Like, all right. Weird days for athletes, but he's NPC, clearly. So Brent Leatherwood gets the Mangina of the Year. We have our inaugural Fake and Gay Award. This goes to Blake Glosson for writing the Taylor Swift article at the Gospel Coalition. Now, Fake and Gay is an acronym, can be shortened into an acronym, by the way, and that completely encapsulates Blake Glosson. So no one really knew who he was before this article, but here he is.
Yeah, I mean it was too
fake and gay.
It was too fake and gay for the Gospel Coalition to publish.
No, it's so fake and gay that they did publish it.
Oh, they rescinded it.
I should say. That was Joshua Butler's article.
No, didn't he also get it? they swiftly removed the Swift article.
Oh, you're right. They did. They did. I did write that headline. And then we have the Chad of the Year. We're on our last few awards here. Chad of the Year.
Tucker Carlson.
I'm going to
I mean,
disagree because I think he's
you're globe trotting. You're doing whatever you want. You
I
have
think he's
FU
also kind of
money.
bought and paid for.
Fair enough, but he's got FU money and he's not afraid to say it.
Uh, but you're also platforming, or you're basically running cover for what's his face, Andrew Tate. Man, how did he not win an award this year?
I mean, he had a couple moments, but obviously with his legal problems, he hasn't been as prevalent.
That dude's gonna be found guilty real quick. Maybe not real quick, but it's a kind of a slam dunk case given the definition of human trafficking in Romania. Uh, we also, so I put Sovereign Bra, who's been one of the dudes featured on the Whatever podcast. The dude looks like a Chad, acts like a Chad, tells women that they're in sin level of Chad. Like, does Tucker Carlson, tell OnlyFans hoes the gospel?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's pretty cool. And obviously, we should have probably had more on the Whatever podcast, given how meteoric their rise has been, and certainly their prominence. Because that's the new libs of TikTok. It's just watching OnlyFans girls justify their lifestyle while getting put the smackdown put on them by a dude that just remotely knows what they're talking about.
Yeah. So now we have the loser of the year. I might have put this up for a poll. So I gotta circle back and double check my polls here. I believe this one might have been put up for popular sovereignty.
I mean, Disney would be my choice, and it's the only one that came to mind given their box office lack of box office success and all the failures they've had. Obviously, as a brand, they've tarnished, perhaps permanently.
So here's the thing. Disney is the winner. It was a close race. Disney has won. So Disney's the winner over Bud Light. So this really comes down to Disney versus Bud Light. And I think the reasons are obvious. Bud Light had the most successful conservative boycott launched against them. However, they did pay, what was it, $20 million
Yeah,
to the
for Dana
UFC.
White.
And now Dana White and Tucker was it Tucker Carlson or no? And now it's Dana White is singing his praises. And someone else, Donald Trump Jr., was also defending him the entire time. So the Trump grift really caped up for for Bud Light at the end of the day, which mitigates their loserishness in 2023. In my
Yeah, I mean
opinion,
they saved off a lot of their losses, or maybe they've bottomed out. Versus Disney, where Disney,
They fired their CEO in the middle of the night on a Sunday.
yeah, and then they brought back the guy that was responsible for crashing the company.
I think Disney's clearly loser of the year.
Yeah, and again, Disney. I mean, the sad part is that Disney might just end up being bought out by like an Apple, and that means that they can do what they're doing in perpetuity because
they cannot keep doing what they're doing in perpetuity.
Yeah, not under their current structure.
Now, Amazon, they do this for fun. Like, they do content as a side project. Like, they're not in it. They're not doing this for the money. And it's hard for Disney to compete with that because they are doing this for the money and they're just really bad at it. And it's because of all the, the woke nonsense that they let in. Now, I want to posit a theory. CGI was better 10 years ago, or in 2009 was probably peak year for CGI. CGI was better then because now CGI, the people who make CGI are, it's basically diversity hires now. What do you think of that theory? And that's
I
why
mean,
CGI is worse now.
I do
It's
think
diversity hires.
the hiring does hurt it. Obviously, maybe overuse because I think Marvel did like green screen plus CGI versus just CGI. So I think there's that element there too.
Okay. I don't want to get bogged down in that theory. But clearly it's just a thought of why CGI is worse now than it was 15 years ago. Winner of the year. This is our last category.
I had Vladimir Putin, and this is your he consolidated gains in Ukraine. You whacked a dissident general, and you've defeated the petrodollar through BRICS, which not even Saddam Hussein or Muammar Gaddafi could do because we removed him from office. So Vladimir Putin did what others before him could not do, and has withstood
You
opposition.
he got Bakhmut retaken. They're about to take Avdiivka. They've almost encircled that. The
Or
Ukrainian
you,
counteroffensive failed miserably.
or we could believe Nikki Haley in saying that he wanted Hamas to attack Israel to distract from his failures in Ukraine.
Yeah, while they actively have the initiative and had before October 7. Because the counteroffensive failed all summer long. But I don't necessarily think he might be the winner of the year. Maybe 2024 might be his year.
Well, I
I think
mean,
Elon Musk is the winner of the year.
I thought of that too. I mean, because I looked at this as
He bought Twitter. He's actually made it more free than when he started. Now, Twitter still has its issues, but and then he renamed it, which is horrendous.
well, I mean, his
Uh,
X thing is his fantasy.
yeah, but I think Elon Musk is clearly the winner of the year. Like
I mean,
he
I went with
defeated the ADL,
yes and no. I mean, the war's still ongoing.
but as far as the advertiser war, I think he's won that. But we'll see.
I mean, again, I was in between Putin and Musk, and because those are who should have won Time Person of the Year or Man of the Year, because it's always going to be a man.
Wow. I mean, I think your argument for Putin's very compelling. Like the dude masterfully stroked a mercenary.
I mean, that's some gangster behavior. That's mobster, and I'm
I
not gonna.
mean, you do realize this type of thing almost toppled Alexander the Great. Everyone has a mutiny. Has to deal with a mutiny at one point in time, but at the end of the day, he's winning the war of attrition, and I think backup 2023 points that out. You don't want to fight a war of attrition against
And
Russia. They have a larger population.
he could end up getting a lot more than he initially sought in this war.
If I were Putin, I wouldn't settle for my initial offer. That
No,
offer's off the
you're
table.
taking everything now.
Yeah,
You're not
I'm going for the whole
negotiating.
thing.
You don't negotiate what's already yours to.
You don't negotiate. You don't take the deal now when you've shed a lot of blood already. You don't take the deal. You don't take your starting position now after all those people died.
Yeah, because all you wanted was demilitarization.
You gave Ukraine a pretty good opening offer that was good for both nations. And then now they said no to that. They wanted to do all this. You got to take it off. So, that opening offer is off the table, but we might come to fruition in 2024. I think, because winning Bakhmut was a pretty big deal, and thwarting the Ukrainian counteroffensive is a pretty big deal. And the petrodollar has yet to be realized as well, or the BRIC currency that is yet.
Yeah,
to
I mean
be
the
realized.
U.S. dollar having a collapse, which again could actually lower
But
interest
the
rates.
stage is set for him to be, tomorrow's winner, but he hasn't won yet. He's up though. He is up, but I think Elon Musk, he's definitely won the war with the people. He even reestablished Alex Jones. So
I mean, yeah, he is certainly a populist, a technocratic Caesar.
A technocratic Caesar. But that is basically all of our Eva Awards. Thank you all for joining us on the Evas. Like I said, if you like this live stream, subscribe to the channel. Also, if you're new, don't forget to hit the like button. But have a blessed rest of the year, and we will catch you on the next one, which will most